live now, Dave.
We're live, David.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the afternoon session of the IP, the Integrated Plan, or better known as the budget process for 2025 through to 2029. And it's my duty to hand over now to Stella, who's going to take us into the Portfolio 5, which is Children, Young People and Families. Stella, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. First of all, good afternoon to you all, and a massive thank you for being here, taking the time out this afternoon to start our annual IP process for children, young people and families. We've got a lot to cover in a very short space of time, which is 40 minutes. However, just before we kick off, get going, I'd like to thank our executive member, Fiona Thompson, and our executive director, Joe Fisher, and team for making themselves available for this important event in HCC's calendar, reassuring our residents on our efficiency and how care is taking of them. With that, we're going to move on to the first question. And the first question is actually from myself to the team. What specific factors are driving the increase in independent placement costs from over 5 million now in 2025-26 to an incredible 23+ million in 28-29? What long-term solutions are being considered to manage these rising costs, ensuring financial sustainability? How will these solutions be implemented, and what are the expected outcomes? There are several different questions within one big one there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And perhaps if I could start. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Fiona Thompson, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Families. And Chair, if it's OK with you, I will start to answer the question and then invite my colleagues, Joe, Miranda and Els, to come in as and when necessary, and Rachel, who is here to answer any of the finance questions. So your question is absolutely pertinent to our budget in children's services, and members will be aware about the pressures on the children's services budget, particularly in relation to the cost of placements for children that we look after. And really there's two main elements to this. One is there is a national shortage of placements for children to be looked after, and that is driving up the cost. And so we know there are a number of large independent providers, and unfortunately because of the demand on places, you get the increase in cost because it's a very competitive market. And then associated with that, we are seeing a higher level of need amongst our young people who are coming into care. And although in Hertfordshire we're very fortunate to have low numbers of children in care, probably around half the national average, which, as you will appreciate, comes with additional cost savings to that, we are seeing an increase in the number of children coming in, a small increase, but it's the level of acuity is significant. So they were the two main factors. And in terms of how are we responding, well, we have an ambitious residential strategy. This is about, our process is about, and our approach is to create our own residential children's homes beds, because we know we can provide better care locally, or not always better, but care locally, which is better for our young people, and at a lower cost. And then added to that, it's about managing the demand coming in, and that's where our family safeguarding model comes in, working with families to keep children safe at home and reducing the numbers of children coming in. So it's really twofold. I am going to open up to colleagues. So Joe, whoever else would like to come in. Joe Fisher, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And I think you set out the sort of factors driving that financial increase really clearly. So grateful to you for that. In terms of what we're doing about it, you're absolutely right. We're both working on the supply side, how we can reset the market by really driving up our own residential and foster care strategy to create more provision locally within Hertfordshire so that children can attend can continue to live in Hertfordshire, attend our local schools and live within their local communities. And also, on the flip side of that, how we're managing the numbers of children coming into care in the first place. And that really plays to the strengths of our early help and family support work and family safeguarding work, where we know that we have nationally some of the lowest numbers of children coming into that high-end provision in Hertfordshire. So our rate of children per 10,000 who are in care is 36, compared to 71 England average and 51 compared to our statistical neighbours. So you can see there that we really do have relatively huge success in maintaining our children living at home and far fewer children coming to care. And in terms of money, that translates into significant cost savings. I'll invite Miranda to say a couple of words in terms of our residential and foster care strategy, and then Elle, maybe a few words on what we're doing in terms of managing the numbers of children coming into care and the impact of our family safeguarding and early health approach.
Thank you, Jo. So to give a little bit more detail in terms of our residential strategy, what our aim is to break the independent market, because currently, as Fiona has pointed out very well, they have a real hold nationally on placements. So our strategy is to continue to develop our in-house beds, so that we completely reduce reliance on the independent market. And to date, we have 21 beds now operational. We have 32 in development, and our aim is to add an additional 17 beds to that, which would give us 70 beds. And we believe that would be enough to break our reliance on the independent market completely and result in significant savings. And of course, most importantly, homes that we run or that we commission, so homes that are our homes where we commission independent providers, we are confident that we provide a much better standard of care for our children. Through our fostering strategy, we continue to work really hard with our colleagues in comms in terms of attracting people into fostering, and we have trialled two really innovative and new approaches over the last couple of years. So the first approach is our emergency foster carers, which is a group of people who provide temporary accommodation for children. That's been enormously successful. We have 6 emergency carers, and they have worked hard to safely return 40 children home, worked really hard with the professional network working around the child, and sort of worked hard to get children out of care. And the benefit of that scheme has also been to also make sure children are more settled if they do have to go on and be in care. And we've also had our we're trialling out our intensive foster carer scheme, but I think that there'll be a further question on fostering, so I'll come on to that a little bit later.
Thank you.
Can I just invite Elle? You're absolutely right, Miranda. I think question 2 really gets into the fostering and adoption costs, fostering adoption for then share, if we may. But Elle, if you could say a few words around how we're managing the overall numbers of children coming into care and safely keeping children at home.
Yes, so really it is a whole system approach which we have well established here in Hertfordshire, starting with our early help intervention that we provide for children and families to nip issues in the bud and to get children and families support really quickly so that problems don't develop and don't become more serious. We perform really well nationally in that space. We're a high performer in relation to our positive outcome returns for those children and families. And then our family safeguarding model, which is a motivational change model in the way that we work with children and families, is also highly successful and independently evaluated as a model that really does make a difference to children and families. And in fact, the national children's social care reforms that the Department for Education are taking forward over the next 12 to 24 months actually recommends and references family safeguarding as a model that local authorities nationally will want to look at and build on. And as a result of that, not only have we got low rates of children in our care, as Joe set out earlier, but we also have very low rates of children who need to be supported through a child protection plan. And that is because joining together with our early intervention, our family safeguarding and our motivational approach to helping families to make the changes to safely care for their children has proved time and time again to be successful. In terms of what we're doing in relation to your specific question around that escalating cost, we have undertaken some analysis of the children who are coming into care and the reasons why they are coming into care to further focus and enhance the offer to particular groups of children who are overrepresented in that number. And what we know is that adolescents who are experiencing what we call acute distress, and that may be arising from a range of different areas, whether it is mental health, their mental health concerns, acute distress as a result of their neurodivergent conditions, or as a result of childhood trauma, or can be a combination of all three of those things, are overrepresented in the group of children who come into our care. So taking the learning from the previous Invest to Transform, which you'll see referred to in the IP as family safeguarding for children in care, taking the learning from that and the successes that we saw with the approach we deployed to reunifying children safely with their families, we're going to move into a phase 2 of that programme to set up a hub that will focus on those children who are acutely distressed and their families, to provide more intensive support to help families make the changes they need to safely care for their children, and also to provide the support to help those children to either stay in their families or return back to their families where they've had a period in care. And we anticipate, as we have successfully achieved from the phase 1 of family safeguarding for children in care, we anticipate that we will be slowly and safely able to bring down the numbers of those children in our care, which then contributes to the work that Miranda's service and the Fostering a Residential strategy are doing around making sure that we've then got sufficient placements for those children who do need to be in care.
Chair, if I may just add to that, and I mean, you can see we have quite an ambitious residential strategy, and that's why within the IP there is the additional £8 million of investment for phase 3 of our residential strategy, and we are moving at pace to realise those beds. But of course, it's bigger than just us. So this is a national issue, and that's why we also need national reform. And we hope the government are listening, and they're starting to make noises about what will come further down the line, just to help local authorities who are all facing a very similar situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fiona. I just have a quick follow on this one. So going back to the budget, the money that this is costing, and I mean, the plan is absolutely admirable, brilliant, absolutely fantastic. It's how has this been costed? So we've gone from 5 million to 23 million. What is the biggest? What is the biggest cost here over this period of time? Because we're investing in homes, fantastic. We've got low numbers in Hertfordshire, but high demand, high need on I understand is the type of care that's required. Obviously, the costing on that. How have we gone from 5 million to 23?
If I may, and I'll bring in Rachel as well, please. But the cost is because we have got two factors going on. One is the cost of the independent placements. So because of the shortage, both locally, regionally and nationally, in the numbers of children's homes, we are placing children in independent children's homes, and that drives up the cost because they charge more.
Yes.
Secondly, the level of need of those children has gone up, which means that in effect we're needing to commission very expensive placements to meet very high levels of need. And again, that's part of a national picture. Hertfordshire is not an outlier in that. But the two factors coming together is driving up the cost, Councillor Nash, which is why our whole strategy is targeted on both bits of the system, both in terms of resetting the cost base for placements by creating more in-house, both foster and residential places, but also working with our community resources through our family help offer to really think about how we meet need and keep children safely at home so they don't need to come into care in the first place. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that in terms of the actual how the figures are playing out?
Thanks, Jo. I suppose the only thing I'd note, and you probably see as part of the IP documentation, there's a number of lines that make up the budget for children looked after. And I suppose in terms of creating of the budget, as Jo mentioned, we look at how the budget is tracking and what we expect to see as the pressures going into next year and beyond, whether that's through, as Jo mentioned, kind of placement mix, if we're seeing kind of that high level of need, meaning we need higher cost places, and what we expect from a demographic point of view. So kind of the impact on our numbers of children. So without stating too much of the obvious, they're kind of the two kind of quite simplistic dynamics. And I suppose we look to model as best we're able to with the CLA numbers, appreciating it's quite a difficult area to kind of really nail down exactly how we expect next year to go, but we look at this year's tracking for what we've seen from either provider inflation, as Jo mentioned, and need, and look to continue that into next year. So I think it talks to, in the IP, that's the process we go through, and trying to draw on as much as we can from this year's trend and understanding of our children and families that we support, what next year looks like. So that's what drives those increased numbers in the IP. But then obviously, as Jo mentioned, overlaying that with our transformation programs, which look to address those pressures as best as we can.
Thank you so much. That absolutely opened up that question. Thank you very much. Going to move us on because we are up against time, and I know we could spend a lot of time on each question. Mark, if you could, your question 2, please.
Certainly, thank you very much. I'll try and be as quick as I can to the questioning. I believe you've already seen these, so this is more for anybody who's listening in away from the group. How can we better control the rising costs of fostering and adoption allowances, which are projected to increase from 1.2 million in 2025-26 to 5.6 million in 28-29? That's the first element. What is the long-term plan to improve recruitment and retention of foster carers, and how will this help reduce reliance on external providers? And finally, what strategies are in place to manage the financial impact of these allowances, and how much is being invested in fostering allowances and other intensive foster carer projects? And before you answer, can I just comment that I noticed that you're actually finding it hard to even retain the foster carer numbers you have. The IP refers to reduced numbers of foster carers. And I note also that you have brought in this intensive scheme and the emergency intensive foster care plans, but the net effect seems to be relatively small compared to the overall budget pressures that you're looking at. So I just thought I'd throw those two comments in. So I don't know who'd like to answer first, I guess Fiona, but I'll let...
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. I'll start, and again, colleagues will come in. So just to set out that fostering allowances are set nationally, so they're set by the government. And I know Rachel will come in and speak a bit more about those figures that you mentioned, which actually reflect increases to special guardianship order allowance as well, which is something coming down the line. Foster carers are so important to us, and actually I met with a group of them last night, and you know, some of them have been fostering for us for 14 years, 15 years, and just their commitment and dedication, the support they give to our young people and how they change their futures is just phenomenal. However, we need to recognise there is a national shortage of foster carers, and we are part of the regional network Foster East, and working collaboratively to encourage more people to sign up as foster carers, and have, you will all have seen the numerous ads that have been circulating and the videos, and we have some amazing fostering ambassadors who've been doing short films for us, because we recognise that actually children and young people can do so much better when they're closer to home and in lovely, nurturing, supportive homes. And alongside that comes the cost savings and the difference between foster care and residential care. So that really is, it is a challenge nationally, and the teams are working so hard to increase the numbers of foster carers. But this is set against the national shortage. You're absolutely right. We've introduced the emergency foster care programme, which has been incredibly successful, which Miranda touched on briefly in the last question. And we have 6 emergency foster carers and have returned almost 40 children home safely to their families, which is incredible. And then our intensive foster care programme, which is very innovative, and that's the one thing we are in Hertfordshire, is incredibly innovative, trying something new. And I think we're mature enough then to reflect and say, okay, how has that gone? Do we need to review it? What do we need to do next? And we have one intensive foster carer who, you know, just even the savings from that one alone has been incredible. But of course, we can't force people to become foster carers, so we can make it as attractive as possible. But you've met foster carers; they're a special group of people, although anybody can foster, and that's the message that we're trying to get out. I will hand over to Miranda next, I think, and then perhaps Rachel may want to come in about the specifics around the finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. I think you've largely covered most of it. So we have Foster East, which has resulted in an increase in inquiries, which is very positive. And then, of course, our innovative projects. We're also a national leader in terms of Mockingbird hubs. So we now have 8 hubs. And we're second only to Leeds in terms of the number of hubs we have, and those hubs are proven. I won't go into the details of that, but absolutely happy to share that information outside of this. But what we know about Mockingbird hubs is they help with retention, they help us keep our foster carers and support our foster carers. Underpinning all of this is our fostering strategy, one team built around the child, and that is basically involves a relentless focus with our colleagues in comms on recruitment. So we basically target our recruitment based on sort of data analysis in terms of the inquiries we get and in terms of trends and things going on in our community, so that we're targeting recruitment to people we think might be interested in being foster carers. And there's also an equally robust focus on performance. So that is an absolute sort of complete focus from inquiry through to assessment and approval in terms of making sure we are getting people through the process as quickly and thoroughly as possible. So that all continues on in terms of our approach. Rachel, did you want to come in on that financial point?
I suppose the only thing I'd probably point to, I think the question I talked about, so is managing pressure and how can we kind of support this area. And I think what we've talked to, we've got a number of strategies in this area to recruit, retain foster carers, and a number of kind of different types of fostering arrangements. And I suppose I'd see this as a good area that we're increasing the budget in. Obviously, the allowances, as I think Fiona and Miranda, you mentioned, are set some nationally, some within Hertfordshire. So I suppose the additional investment that's going in there to put increases annual on those budgets and increasing that foster care provision is a good area of spend for us, and I think that's noted in social care reforms and around if it's possible for our young people coming to care, the benefit of being in that family environment. So yes, as a whole council we have to look at using resources, but yeah, we see this as a positive area of increasing our CLA budget where we can.
Just to add, thank you, Rachel, just to add to Rachel's point, what we're hearing in terms of, we get a lot of feedback from people we're recruiting and people who make inquiries, and what we're hearing, and it won't come as any surprise, is currently one of the things that is putting people off is the cost of living. So indeed, sort of to Rachel, as Rachel has said, this is an area where investment pays dividends. It's significantly cheaper on a weekly basis to pay for a foster care placement versus a residential placement. And we know that, as Fiona pointed out really beautifully in her response, children need loving family homes, and that is what brings them on more than any other kind of care.
Thank you.
If I can come back, thank you so much. If I may, first of all, if I understand the various strands of this strategy, one is to build more homes so children can be looked after in homes. but I suspect that that's really not as desirable for us as having foster carers. It's more a question of necessity. That's just a statement, really. The question really is, the independent sector, in terms of foster carers, are they able to pay greater allowances than they are? And I was interested in what Rachel just put in, almost incidental. Hertfordshire can do something with allowances. They're set on national, then Rachel dropped in the words, and Hertfordshire. So the question I'm going to ask is, do we have any scope to be able to actually increase the allowances by some other initiative, by incentive, to encourage more people to come and join us and maybe not lose them to the independent sector? Because everyone who we have here is still getting it's cheaper than putting them out to the independent sector.
Yeah,
Joe.
thanks. Oh, Chair, if I may, I'll start and then hand over to Joe. So two really good points, Mark. One was in relation to, increasing our capacity within the foster care service, but we will always need some residential provision as well. So it's around having that balance. But you're absolutely right. For the majority of children, then actually for them to be cared in foster care is better for them, but we will always have a need for residential children's home. And then the second point in relation to fostering allowances, yes, proportion set by the government, we also have that flexibility, and we did increase them last year. So, and I suspect that's why Joe's put her hand up. And in terms of how much we increased them last year, I'm going to have to go to Rachel on that, or unless Joe has that figure. But we took that view because we need to remain competitive. We're so close to London, we're close to Essex and the neighbouring counties. And obviously we want to attract foster carers into Hertfordshire and Hertfordshire foster carers. Yeah. And just your comment about independent fostering agencies, having spoken with many of our foster carers, some of them have been with the independent agencies, but actually like our support better. So
thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Joe, your hand has gone down. Is that?
Fiona, I think Fiona covered it.
Thank you.
So can I have one more question, if I may, Stella?
Mark.
I'm being naughty.
Mark.
I can't.
Mark, I've got two more people. If there's time at the end, you certainly can.
Okay.
I'm going to move on to Nigel. 40 minutes. I know we could be here all afternoon. Nigel, thanks. Sorry,
Thank
Mark.
you. Thank you, Stella, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for what everyone's doing. And I just wanted to say myself that obviously we always need more foster carers, and I know that you're always trying to be innovative in what you're doing. So it was great to hear about the extra emergency foster carers and those 40 extra of those staying at home, and that's fantastic. But mine's merely more of a processing now because of what's been answered already. I mean, I did have down that why the rise in the budget summary of independent placements from 5.7 million to 23 million, which obviously Stella's already said, and comparing that to in D7 when you talk about the IP summary, and it sort of largely stays the same. But maybe that's a Rachel can put me right there. It's me, the accounting. Maybe that's an accounting issue. So I don't know if you can confirm that. My other bit was just saying, what other measures are being taken to manage rising costs? Well, in other areas, but you've already said that. But maybe you could just come back on some of the other things you're doing to manage rising costs. I mean, you've mentioned fostering, but other things maybe you're looking at. But maybe Rachel can just confirm that difference between D7 and SSE2 in the budget plans.
Thank you, Nigel. Absolutely. And I think these really refer to demographic pressures, inflationary costs, trying to forecast. But Rachel has the details, so I'll hand over to her. Thank you.
Thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Fiona. So yeah, as I mentioned, just in response to the question, there's a number of lines that make up the children looked after budget. So just with the particular ones that you've asked in the question, so SSE2 is the inflation uplift on the provision, and that equates to approximately 8% uplift, and that's separated out from the other two lines that on the D. So those are the demographic increases, separated into two, just to separate out on D7. That is noted the pressure that we're seeing in 24-25, so essentially just kind of rebasing the budget for 25-26 for the pressure that we're seeing this year and over and above the budget, and then D8 looks to build on that and bring in further demographic increase for next year and beyond. So we've just looked to separate out the elements of that kind of that budget build for next year.
Oh, right. That's clear because sorry, thanks for that. Yeah, that's clearer now. it's very easy. Lots of people have been looking at the two and saying why they're the same. So I can see that, and the inflation,
Yeah,
the
so
8%
yeah,
inflation.
Apologies. Yeah, that's why D7's flags. It's just that rebase, and then D8 is the
Thank
additional.
You. And just anything else from anybody else about? Obviously, you've already talked about any other ways of manage the rising costs generally. That, I mean, you've already talking about the other, emergency care, us having more in-house places. Is there anything else that you're looking at?
Yeah, there would be, which I think Elle briefly touched on, was the family safeguarding children in care. So that's about returning children safely home, and that was an Invest to Transform programme, and that's now going to become business as usual with the additional 2.4 million annual investment, which is outlined in the IP. So that's yet again another measure, and that's about strengthening the support, family support, really, to enable children to return safely home. I've seen several hands go. I don't know if Elle, if you want to add a little bit more about that, and I know Jo has her hand up, so to go to her afterwards.
Yes, thanks, Fiona. So as we've set out, having an adequate fostering and residential strategy to ensure we've got sufficiency of placements and the right placements for children is really important. And you've heard about what that looks like and what that is hoping to achieve. But it is also really critical that we control the numbers of children that we have in care, both in terms of making sure that we've got intensive intervention to prevent children coming into care when we could, by taking a different approach to help their families make the changes they need to care for their children safely, keep those children at home. And we've already got many strong measures in place that we're doing that already through our family help offer, through our family safeguarding. But you've heard that we're going to use some of that 2.4 million investment to set up a multidisciplinary hub to work specifically and in a different way with those adolescents who are presenting as acutely distressed, because we've recognised that in terms of that increased number of children coming into care, we've in previous years not got that quite right. So we're going to take all of the positive learning from the Family Safeguarding Children in Care project, things like life coaches to work with families, and multidisciplinary team working with some of our trauma-informed colleagues and our mental health practitioners to look at actually how we can support that group of children in a different way, so that they can stay at home.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. We've got the reinforcement of we're looking to keep children at home, which is it's gone across the whole of this. Time is tight. Peter, is your supplementary question still there?
Yeah, yes, it is. Sorry, just very quickly, I was going to ask it after your first question, but it's come up again in Nigel's question. That 23 million, with the projected for 28-29, with the plans in place, is that 23 million expected to come down? That's my question.
Okay, okay, thank you, Peter, for that question. Rachel, can I hand that to you as our finance guru, please? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So that figure noted as inflation, but I suppose it's important to consider that there's also an impact of placement mix as well, as Jo talked to. So where we're seeing, I suppose, an increase in kind of weekly cost pressure of placements, some of that is provider inflation, but also some of that is kind of a shift in profile mix with more need for independent residential provision, as Jo mentioned. That's the gross uplift to the budget. So you'll note that there's also noted in the IP a number of savings lines resulting from the transformation programs that we mentioned. So I suppose the reduction to the budget is shown on those savings lines. So yes, that's the I suppose the do nothing sort of position, but off that then there's a number of savings that are noted against the family safeguarding program, as Elle's just talked to, from either kind of prevention to care or supporting to return home, or the fostering programs. So conscious of time, but that is, I suppose, without
thank
the programs
you,
and then the
Rachel.
savings.
Honestly, thank you. Real detail. Thank you. Calvin, we're going to have to save it to the end. We need to move on to the next question. It's actually to Peter's question, and keep that right to the end. And if not, we'll get it in writing.
Okay, I'll quickly move on then. So my question is, what will the impact be of the proposed budget cuts on service quality, particularly frontline services? How much is expected to be saved through the cuts, and what specific areas will be affected? How are we measuring the success and outcomes of external placements outside of Hertfordshire? And are we getting value for money from these external providers? And how much more are we spending on external placements compared to in-house placements? So I appreciate there's several questions there.
Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. I'll start, and again, then I'll hand over to colleagues. So bit stumped by this question because actually there are no budget cuts in children's services this year. So I guess it's just important to state that. And certainly picking, so once we've got that out of the way, then it's actually how are we addressing just the budgetary challenges, and clearly, as we've mentioned, we're looking to deliver savings via our efficiencies, and we've spoken about the residential academy, residential strategy, fostering strategy, supporting our children and young people to stay safely at home where it's appropriate, but obviously reducing the cost of care for children who do come into the care of the local authority. So they're sort of the main in-house areas where we are focusing. I mentioned briefly the residential strategy, which I don't think we've mentioned, and that's creating and training our own residential children's care home workers, and we've had several very successful cohorts going through, and having met some of them, they're amazing, and they come in with no background or no previous experience of working with children and young people. So they come from a diverse range of occupations, landscape gardener, graphic designer, and chef are three that I met, but absolutely have a desire to come and work with children and to learn, just how to support children and young people with really complex needs. So very proud of that, and that's an innovative program. I think we were the first in the country to introduce it. I think I've got colleagues. Anybody wish to come in to add something I have not
Miranda
mentioned?
might want to say a few words around our strong sort of quality assurance that we've got.
Yes, thank you. The governance.
Absolutely. So absolutely, thank you, Jo. Thank you, Fiona. So all our placements are very carefully monitored through our brokerage service. So that involves, they have really stringent guidelines in terms of the placements that we commission and what we can and can't commission, and some of those are governed by legislation, and indeed Ofsted registration is required as well. So there's some very, very sort of strict laws, and then strict internal council controls in terms of how we contract these providers. And on top of that, our brokerage service regularly visit and review every provider that we use. And in addition to that, there's also the added safety net of the social workers and their requirements to visit as well.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you for that, for your answer. We have a couple of minutes left. Calvin, I'm going to go back to yourself. What was your question?
Yes, thank you. My question went back to the previous item and was really around the D7 line, which Rachel mentioned, being the adjustment for last year. And I'm assuming with it being in the demography section that it's to do with an estimation of demographic pressure last year. So bearing that in mind, and what Rachel was saying earlier about the difficulties in forecasting within children looked after, what changes have been made in the way that demography is modelled for the future from this year compared to last year, and how confident can we be that what we're being shown here is actually, what is the level of confidence that officers have in their projections going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. I'm going to hand that one straight to Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I see we've got 1 minute, so I'll try and be brief. I suppose
you don't have to use the whole minute, Rachel.
I won't. I suppose we look to track each month how the spend is going against the budget, and I suppose use that to inform future projections. Building the trends that we're seeing in the data, as Elle mentioned, in terms of the need profile of the young people and then postment provision. So I suppose just trying to use all those different data sets for what we know in terms of the age profile of the young people, and continuing that through to next year. What we have seen this year is a small increase in our CLA numbers, which is driving that kind of in-year pressure. And I suppose looking to project that continues into next year and doing the best we can with all those various kind of intelligence, but also kind of the soft intelligence from the workforce, from Elle and Miranda's team, in terms of what we know that the costs of that provision is likely to be next year. And I suppose those are all the things that we use to do our very best to set the budget for next year.
Yeah, and
Rachel, thank you for speed talking there.
Stella, if I may just add, and of course that's what we can control, and that's absolutely what we are doing. And I have daily budget meetings focused on our spend, our savings, our innovation. But as I've mentioned earlier, we need national reform, and so we need the government to support local authorities.
Hear it loud and clear, Fiona.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you all for this absolute Grand Prix through children, except this afternoon, and for all your contributions. Absolutely magnificent. Thank you so much. But I'm going to have to bring it to a close now.
Thank you very much, Chair. Really appreciate the time.
Bless you all.
Chair, we're now live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Education, Libraries and Lifelong Learning IP evidence gathering session. We have very limited time, only 30 minutes. The group has picked 3 lines of inquiries, so we will get straight into those. I'll be keeping strictly to time as we move through the inquiries, and I would ask officers and the executive member to keep answers as succinct as possible. Thank you. So shall we move on to our first line of inquiry? Can I invite Sally Symington to kick off with a question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, John. Just going to highlight part of the IP which mentions that there are insufficient places available for children with special educational needs, and that a significant number of children and young people are unable to access places. So my question is, what is the remaining shortfall over and above what's in the IP in specialist local provision?
Thank you very much, Sally. Hello, John. Hello, committee. So the number of places provided that's in the papers will actually increase to 842 by the end of the academic year 2024-2025. Almost 300 of those places have been delivered in 2024-2025. So those additional places have made a considerable difference to the amount of children waiting more than 1 year for a place. Now, that number is currently standing at 70, but we do have a significant amount more of children in Hertfordshire that are awaiting a special school. And just to add on to that, as well as those specific numbers, within the IP, capital funding has been included to support projects to deliver places beyond the additional 842. So we've got the 100 SLD places in Buntingford, a new primary school for children with communication and autism, the relocation and enlargement of Breakspear School, and the enlargement of the Colette School. So we are making investments in not just those big capital projects, but also in our smaller SRP, specialist resource provision bases. Happy to see if the officers would like to add any more additional detail to that.
Thank you, Caroline. I think Hero's on the call. Hero, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, but I think Caroline has pretty much covered off the answer.
Yes, I would agree. I guess it's just to highlight, Sally, really, that we're doing a lot of work in this space around what our sufficiency landscape needs to look like, so that we're not always in a position of sort of trying to play catch up by enhancing the provision, but that we've got a very good strategic approach to this, including an enhanced mainstream offer, which Caroline talked to, in line with the government's direction of travel, really, in terms of what that inclusive mainstream offer needs to look like, and then what does our specialist provision needs to look like. So a lot of work happening over coming months on that to develop some SEND sufficiency proposals for public consultation.
Okay, thank you. And then the second part of the question is what further investment is required and what savings are anticipated?
I mean, when it comes to further investment, we are constantly looking at what we can do within our capital programme, as I said, looking at additional places that we can provide either within existing schools or creating new school places. So we will continue to look at the our school planning and our special school strategy, which it makes notes to in the paper. I mean, I think, to kind of answer your question in the most rounded way, demand is continuing to rise, and that's not just an issue in Hertfordshire, but that's a national issue. So we can continue to invest in it. We can continue to increase the amount of places available, the amount of places that we can offer to Hertfordshire children who are awaiting a special school place. But against the backdrop, we are still having a huge rise in the demand. So even though we're keeping up with it, the tide is often getting away from us. That's, I think, how I can answer your question more broadly. Hero, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
I think that's right. I think that's why this work is so important around a reset of the SEND landscape. You know, we set our own local thresholds for special school. There is no national framework for that. And that's obviously been a sort of historical model, but against the rising need that we're seeing, that just isn't sufficient to meet how it would have been sort of, you know, back in sort of 2017, 18. So there does need to be a reset around, as I say, the enhanced mainstream offer, an alternative provision offer and a special school offer, so that we can meet the needs of the most complex children in our specialist provision and enable all of our children to thrive really in their settings.
And just to kind of, I mean, add on to that, you know, as we're saying, this is a national issue. So as well as all of the work that we're doing here in Hertfordshire, we are lobbying the government continually. We're meeting up with all of the MPs in Hertfordshire. We're writing to the ministers, inviting them to Hertfordshire. I know that we are not the only local authority that's involved in this piece of work, trying to lobby them and look for national reform. While the landscape is as it is, obviously we will continue to work as hard as we can in Hertfordshire to enable every child here to, you know, have exactly what they need to be able to thrive. But we do need change in national policy.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members of the group? Could I just ask? I mean, I've been on this committee for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for about 20 years now, and I joined when delivering special needs provision locally was being launched. So this has been a constant theme throughout the time I've certainly been at Hertfordshire, and it seems to be this thing about the tide. Is there an issue with forecasting here? So why are we always behind? Why can't we get ahead? Do we need to improve our projections, or is there something else that's going on? And also, is there actually a hard number to the savings that we're actually making by bringing provision into Hertfordshire?
I mean, well, there's a few questions there. Starting with the hard number of savings, by yes, I mean there will be a hard number of savings by bringing children into Hertfordshire, and so much as we're not paying, you know, expensive both out of county placement costs, but also the transportation costs that are associated with sending our children further afield. I think, you know, during that time, yes, I'm sure you have seen us continually talk about the tide, but during that time, I mean, we have made significant improvements. I mean, we've opened 1,000 new special school places nearly, which is a significant amount. But against that backdrop, we're finding more and more children, not just in Hertfordshire, but nationally, having more and more complex needs, and meeting their need, trying to find a way to make sure that those needs are being met and delivered. So it isn't just a Hertfordshire problem. You know, it would take, I think, at the moment, for every single local authority across the country to be able to fix this problem, it would take I couldn't even think of the infinite amount of money it would cost. But at the moment, we are not getting the right amount of funding from government. We have certainly throwing a lot of resources at it from Hertfordshire County Council. You know, we started off when I took over the portfolio with a £5 million per annum, you know, investment into the SEND service. You know, we have used that money to recruit 138 new staff, which is kind of no small undertaking in a complicated job market. And even with those 138 new staff, we are getting through a tremendous amount more cases and EHCPs that we were when, I don't know, maybe when you were first asking the very same questions to the same scrutiny committee every year. But against that backdrop, we're having more and more children coming forward. So even that 138 new staff isn't getting to the end of it. So yes, we are dealing with more cases, but there are more and more children coming into the system. I hope that does that answer. Was there a third question you had there, John? I'm sorry. I know there was.
Sorry, shall we move? Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Caroline. I can see Joe has a hand up, and Hero.
I'll be very brief because I can see Hero's got a hand up. But I just wanted to answer very quickly the question about prediction of numbers. I think up until 2 to 3 years ago, we simply didn't have the data that allowed us to make really sort of good predictions and manage the levels of need that we saw coming through the system. We do now have a really clear data-informed approach to our strategy for children with special educational needs. And so we're over the last 2 to 3 years, Hero and her team have put together a really good foundation so that we can model and predict the numbers of children that we'll need to meet the needs of in future years. That said, of course, it's in that national context that Caroline touched on. Hero, were you going to add to that?
just to say the same thing, really, Joe, and just to draw your attention, John, really, that there has been a real step up in those needs. It really isn't the same as it was 20 years ago. And that's recognised both from an education lens in terms of the public committee currently open to look at that, from an Ofsted lens. They're opening up a consultation again on the SEND inspection framework, but now in the recent months from a financial lens as well. So the Institute of Fiscal Studies completed a report that was published this month that said that cumulative debt for local authorities on high needs will be at 8 billion by 2027-28. So we are creating that provision, we're spending on that provision, but we're not enabled to be able to keep up with the demand as it comes through, hence the need for the national reset, really, that looks like it may be forthcoming.
Okay, we need to move on. Thank you very much for your comprehensive answers. That's great. Thank you very much. Shall we move on now to our second line of inquiry? Can I invite Jeff Jones to ask a question? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. My question is on the home to school transport for SEND children. It always amazes me the cost for that transport and the budget that we have for it. And notice that savings are expected of 1.46 million for home to school transport for 25-26. What proportion of this is expected to be from personal travel budgets? I see we've brought that in now. And what will be the impact of these savings be for residents? And also, you notice the out of county transport is quite a cost as well. Perhaps what would the savings for that be for the financial year?
Thanks, Jeff. So there is a saving in there of 1.046 million. So that's based on a forecast. Hello?
Sorry, I got that slightly wrong then. It's 1.46.
Yeah, so that's based on an increase in the number of personal travel budgets, PTBs. The current level of children using PTBs in the counties are 705. We are expecting that to go up to 867. It's been really positive, the PTBs, in reducing the cost of transport. But I think more importantly, what it's about isn't just reducing the costs, but it's about kind of arming, young people with, the independence to be able to kind of go on and live as full a life as possible, and use their preferred method of transport and really get them ready for their kind of next phase. Now, we have had quite a higher take up of PTBs, but just to kind of make it clear, the whether or not parents decide to take up a personal transport budget is completely discretionary. We're not, forcing those on them. We're giving it individual choice. But the whole point of that is you get a travel trainer that takes you out, kind of allows you, teaches children how to be able to do it, so they feel confident to be able to do it. Now, the saving that's in the papers does relate to the use of PTBs, but we're also having success in our route optimization and delivering better routes, looking at kind of best way for people to get to school. Now, if there's a lower than for the forecast that's in the papers increase in the PTBs, we're hoping that the route optimization work that's going on alongside it should kind of mitigate that and offset any risk in there. I hope that answers your question. Is there anything that you any of the officers want to add to that?
Again, I think, just talking on behalf of officers, I think you've covered it. So I'll just see if there's any follow-up questions.
Oh, sorry, Jeff, you were asking about out of county as well, weren't you?
Yes, I was going to say.
Sorry.
County.
Yeah. Sorry. My apologies. I was going about PTBs. So at the moment we have about just under 3,500 commission places at Hertfordshire special schools. Out of that number, about 200 of those are coming from out of county for a variety of reasons. But because of looking at the specific locations, most of those 200 will be where we've got schools which are on the border of Hertfordshire, Hertfordshire Beds, Hertfordshire Essex, for example, or Cams. In some respects, we've got special schools which have their own specialisms, which will attract certain pupils. So I mean, here I might be able to go into more detail of that. But we've got some special schools that have a specific specialism. I don't know if that's a proper term, where it would be absolutely the right fit of that. Now, by the same token, so we've got some children from out of county who are attending Hertfordshire schools. We've also got a small number of children from Hertfordshire that would be attending schools out of county for those same reasons. Whether it's them being on the board of them being very much specialist within the EHCPs that are being written, they have to very much suit the child. So in some cases, it's going to be a combination of parental choice, exactly what's right for the child. Now, obviously, wherever possible, moving forward and within our special school strategy, where we are obviously increasing the amount of special school places that we have in Hertfordshire, the best thing for anyone in any circumstance would be for them to go to the school nearest to them. That's not always possible, and even if a school place becomes available that is nearest to them, for some children that have been in a school for a few years, it might be quite disruptive, the upheaval of actually moving once they're settled into that school environment. So I think moving forward, our special school place strategy and the increase in places will allow us to make sure that most Hertfordshire children are going to a school within Hertfordshire and hopefully closer to them, because that's going to be the best outcome for them. Nobody wants to be sitting for put their child in transportation for an hour and a half to get to school on a daily basis. It's actually not great for anyone's mental health either. I'll pass over at this point to the officers to see if there's anything that they'd like to add that I've missed out.
I can't see any of the officers putting their hands up. Again, I think, Caroline, you covered it very well.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any follow-up questions, Jeff?
Yeah, if I could, if we have time.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
In terms of the, you were talking about the new school placements that we've got planned, which is great to see. Are they all on schedule? Any problems there? I'm thinking in particular the new Bundyford satellite.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our office is doing a fantastic job of keeping to schedule. They know that we are very ambitious. Well, all the officers are very ambitious to make sure that we try and deliver as many additional school places as possible. Within any large building project, I'm not necessarily talking about just the SRPs adding additional places onto existing schools, but with some of our larger capital projects, for example, Breakspear, there are always going to be little snags that happen along the way, whether they dig a hole and suddenly find out that underneath there's something they weren't anticipating. Yeah. But in the main, within the schedule, we tend to have some contingency on all of these projects. And I have to say that the officers it's actually not my department. We deal with the provision of education, but when it comes to actually the building, it falls under Bob Deering and his resources department, and against some challenging issues with many of our larger school builds and big capital projects, I think they've done a sterling job in making sure that those schools are open to time. Now, unlike a normal mainstream school, the difference is when you open up a special school, normally they tend to bring the students in smaller tranches to get them used to the school anyway. So they might open a special school and start with, 6, 10, 20, 30. So they're not under the same kind of pressure as you would be opening a new mainstream school that's, however many form entry, that it has to be delivered to time, otherwise the school's not able to open. But as I say, I think the officers have done a sterling job in making sure that their delivery is pretty much to time, and they're dealing with snagging and sticking to a project plan as best as possible.
Okay,
and
thank
yes,
you, Caroline.
Buntingford is on time, which I think was your original question.
Indeed, yeah.
Thank you.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move on now to our third line of inquiry? Can I hand over to Chris Lloyd to ask a question? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. How robust is the current focus, not just for the current IP period, but going forward, because it seems to be growing significantly. So I'll take that as first question, and I've got a second question I'll ask rather than get you muddled on both of them.
Okay.
That's a high needs deficit. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
High needs deficit. My apologies
Yeah.
for not giving an intro. Sorry, Chairman.
No problem. Thanks, Chris. I mean, you know, you and I think most of the committee members are aware that there are some real national challenges when it comes to this in delivering support to children and young people with SEND, and along that line with forecasting expenditure. The level of need in Hertfordshire, both in terms of, you know, the complexity of needs and the number of children, continues to increase significantly. I think I've mentioned that a few times. So trying to model it is quite a considerable challenge. So very grateful to all the officers who have kind of worked to try and do that. We're doing everything possible to make sure that the budgets are as robust as possible. You know, there's so much uncertainty. But there's lots of engagement between the people who work in finance and between, you know, Hero as the Director of Inclusion and Skills to try and kind of get to the point where we have an understanding, we feel as confident and as comfortable as we can with the numbers that we are bringing out. But, you know, the significant risk has to be noted. You know, we've had changes in the levels of need over the last year, you know, the overspend of 15 million. This is a, you know, I hate to go back and say it again, but this is a recognised national issue. So we're just going to need to kind of continue engaging with central government on the need for a national solution, because we might, you know, be comfortable with the figures that we're providing this year and with the figures that we're providing next year. But as we start moving into the following year, 5 years from now, I think it's very difficult to look into the future and get an understanding of exactly where we're going to be, how we're going to be able to manage that financially, and how confident we can be with those numbers that we're bringing forward. I don't know if any of the officers would like to add any level of detail to that.
Just, I mean, Rachel may want to come in, but just to reiterate what you said very briefly, there is a correlation between our high needs funding, which funds the provision for children in our schools and our settings, early years and post-16 colleges, etc., and both the numbers of children who need that provision and the type of provision they need too. So also it talks to the complexity of the need that we're seeing in our children and young people. So we do use our data. We work very closely with our finance colleagues, and we do very clear predictive analysis across this, but it's not a hard science. You know, it's very difficult in what is a national context of volatility, both across budgets and across need.
Okay, thank you.
Can I come
Chris?
back in? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to just pick up on what, you know, it is a national picture. We do need to lobby through whatever way, not just inviting MPs and governments, but wider local councils. So I'd like to ask, what will be the impact on the education and lifelong learning should a section 114 notice be issued? And what is our contingency plan? Because obviously there are concerns, if you read out in the media, of potential impacts that are happening in other councils. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris, for raising that. And I mean, you know, this is also raised, I think, in the IP papers. It's been the CFOs have made note of that within the IP about the possibility of this. I mean, as you know, that at the moment we've got a statutory override, which, you know, is due to be expired. So we don't know what's going to happen after that stage. But I think the question more is not necessarily what the impact is going to be on the ELL panel, but what will be the impact to the whole of Hertfordshire County Council, sure. Because it's not actually something that's necessarily going to affect this. You know, if we are trying to deliver statutory services, or sorry, we are under obligation, obviously, to be able to deliver statutory services in this local authority, then, you know, that would put us in a position where we were unable to do that. And I think that's a situation that not just Hertfordshire as a local authority would find itself in, but many other local authorities across the country if the statutory override was going to go. So I think the impact wouldn't be just on this panel, but the impact will be on Hertfordshire as a whole. And yes, it is very concerning. And once again, this kind of takes us full circle back to the fact that unless we start to get more support from the national government for the statutory services that we have to deliver, while demand is exceeding supply, and supply is effectively constrained or limited by our financial limitations, which we all have, then everybody is in an extremely precarious situation, not just the ELL panel, not just Hertfordshire County Council, but every single local authority across the country. Sorry, I'd love to have given you a more optimistic and happy answer to that question. So I didn't mean that to be so negative, but that is, you know, when we look forward, it is, I think it is very concerning, not just for us, but for everyone.
Yeah.
Anything anybody would like to add?
No.
Would schools be affected? So if a 114 were issued, would schools be affected, or do they have a separate funding stream through, you know, directly from DFE?
Well, I mean, at the moment we are effectively subsidising the schools. We are subsidising the schools block through the Hertfordshire County Council budget.
Right.
So yes, they would be affected. I mean, you know, already they're kind of, I suppose schools are looking to work out how to use the funding that they have most effectively as possible. But yes, they would have to start making, I suppose, difficult choices about how they would deliver most effectively to be able to give the best outcomes to the children without kind of losing resources, whether that be teaching staff, etc. I don't know if any of the officers would like to come back on that, but I think, you know, the fact that we are already subsidising those schools, if that money was taken away, then they'd be in an even more precarious situation.
Thank you, Caroline. I think it might be worth Rachel just coming in and just explaining very briefly the difference between the sort of DSG funding for schools and the council funding, but also making the point that, of course, we fund wraparound supports to schools as well through our council funding, as Caroline has said. So, you know, they wouldn't be immune. Rachel, go ahead.
Thanks, Jo. Yes, just in terms of, I suppose, core school budgets funded by the Dedicated Schools Grant. So it is a ring-fenced grant. So from that regard, that's obviously outside of the council's finances. And so DSG continues an annual settlement from the government. And as Caroline's talked to, the high needs part of that DSG is under significant strain. And there's been numerous kind of lobbying activities, and that was mentioned just earlier in terms of Hertfordshire's funding isn't adequate for the need profile. So from a high needs position, obviously that continues to be a challenge. And as Caroline just touched on, Hertfordshire funds, I suppose, the support to schools. So kind of the other sport, whether that's kind of in hero service or in Tony's service in terms of sport structures. So if we were to be in a position of having to review the entire council's position with kind of that 114 consideration, I suppose it's those support services to schools that will be impacted. So it wouldn't necessarily impact that schools block DSG per se, but I suppose the wider schools impact is on the support that the council provides through the services that we offer. And obviously that high needs block, as noted, we're in projecting to move into a significant deficit. So we need to consider that each year when we're setting the budget and what that means for support and provision that's in place.
Okay, thank you. That's a helpful insight. Any further questions, Chris?
No, I was going to allow you, Chairman, some room to either ask questions or follow up on other points.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for everyone for being so concise. Are there any other further wrap-up questions, please, before we finish? Okay, I think we are ahead of time. That must be quite unusual. So thank you all very much. Can I remind group members that we have a separate session? Lucy sent out a link, and then we are going to be discussing. We're going to move over from here to there to talk about recommendations. So unless there's anything else, thank you all, Caroline.
Thank you for having me.
And your team for answering our questions.
And thank
I'm very much alive.
Chairman, meeting is live.
Thank you and welcome, and thank you for those people attending and participating. And we've done a roll call so we know who should be here and who is here. Let's not remember what this directorate is all about. This directorate supports sustainable environmental friendly growth across the county, so that residents benefit more and better jobs and homes to live in. So Hertfordshire can continue to be an economic powerhouse in the country and go further to unlock its full potential. All that being done, hopefully, with an environmental net gain. So that's where we're targeting. This does not deal with, of course, with highways. It doesn't deal with flooding. This is the environmental side of life. And so the three issues we're going to talk about. One is the impact of the famous Harlow-Gilston Garden Town. We'll talk about minerals and waste, and that's what we need to know what we have to do and how we can do it. And then economic growth and what we're doing to develop the economy in Hertfordshire and for the people of Hertfordshire. So we start off first with the Harlow-Gilston Garden Town. And I think that, John, you want to talk about that, and perhaps Alison as well?
Alison is going to lead on this, Terry.
No problems at all. Alison, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Terry. Thank you. The first question: what are the risks associated with the Harlow-Gilston Garden Town project, and how are they being managed? Which means, what guarantees can you give us that there are that it is a realistic amount of money for the lifespan of this project, currently at 122 million this year? Thank you.
Okay, should I come in with that, Terry?
Yes, please, Stephen.
Okay, so we will all be delighted to know that the 106 was signed at the beginning of January. It is subject to a 6-week judicial window, though we've not heard that anybody wants to challenge that. So it's good news. The risks associated with the project are considered by the 5 councils, and those 5 councils form the joint committee, and by Herts County Council in respect of the HIG, the Housing Infrastructure grant. The top 3 joint committee risks are, firstly, the Gilston Planning Permission 106 legal agreement and the infrastructure grant spend. Secondly, the modal transition implementation, and thirdly, the land assembly complexities. Partners have sought legal advice throughout the planning application determination period to ensure that it is legally sound, and partners are seeking the 106 contributions to ensure that the network can be delivered alongside growth. Partners are progressing appropriate actions and mitigations, such as the compulsory purchase, to ensure land is available to deliver the growth and associated infrastructure. The main risks for this council are that the HIG funding isn't spent, or at least not all of it, within the contractual time frame. This may cause some reputational harm in the eyes of government and other funding bodies. There are few direct financial implications for this council. We have back-to-back arrangements in place to pass through the obligations of the HIG contract to the partners, and we're currently finalising a deed of variation with Homes England to extend the contractual timeframe, and this will help ensure that this council is able to maintain its obligations under that contract. The whole HGGT project is challenging, and it's challenged by the rising costs of infrastructure, and Homes England will carry out their own assurance each year to ensure that budgets set are realistic. The county's financial obligations are index linked, and the approach is sufficiently flexible to facilitate evolving approaches to service provision, especially considering the extended period over which the development will come forward. The total time is up to 40 years. For example, following delivery of the first primary and secondary schools, the Section 106 allows the education strategy to develop over time, allowing the Children's Services team the flexibility to bring forward further new and/or expanded schools as updated information on admissions becomes available.
Thank you, Steve.
plenty of it is well under control, I think.
Alison, does that meet the needs of your question?
Thank you. Yeah, you have been quite comprehensive. I just want to check, when you talked about index linking, do you mean you are basically referring to the fact that with a potential 40-year window for the borrowing, that you believe that you will be able to moderate exchange rates and things like, interest rates and things like that? Could you just give me a little bit more information?
There is an index linked provision, which we have on here. Colin, you're on the call. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In summary, when we ask for an amount towards education or highways or a waste facility, from the date we calculate that amount, it's index linked. So the amount of money the developer will pay us at a point in future is the value of money equivalent to what it would be now. So we would still be able to afford it. We won't see the value of that money become less over time. So that gives us the greatest chance of being able to afford the item in 5, 10, 20 years, whenever it's needed to match the pace of growth at Gilston.
Thank you very much, because it is substantial, isn't it, Alison? Yeah, that development of substantial, and they have an impact on that part of the county for a good number of years. Moving on there. So, John, you want to come in on any other part on this? You go on mute, my friend, John.
Sorry, forgot to turn the mic on.
Good.
There's always one, isn't there? Obviously, we talked a little bit just then about the cash that's coming in, but does the council have the resources to ensure that developer contributions, which are going to be delivered in kind, are delivered? And I mean, this is where, for instance, developers agree to actually produce the buildings, etc. You know, put up the street lamps.
Yes, I think we are reasonably confident of this. The unit is tasked with commenting on local plans generally, and sorting out and negotiating the 106 legal agreements on behalf of Herts County Council Services. The unit also monitors the receipts of the 106 and publishes data on this. The team, for example, have successfully secured £28 million of contributions for 23-25 and currently hold about £88 million. We recently updated the developer contributions guide and the service provision and placemaking guide to explain to districts and developers what we will seek in future developments. And this is important because it means that developers and indeed other councils won't be able to come to us and say, we didn't know the sort of thing you would require. So they know that now. I would say that the directors here are confident that we have sufficient resources in place to continue to secure the appropriate contributions, obviously depending on the planning systems guidance, that planning must be, the schemes must be viable, and there's a cash allowance for that, as you know. And the recently signed 106 for Gilston comprises about £250 million contributions for Herts County Council Services, excluding the highways provision. And we're confident that the in-kind can be provided and dealt with in-house as well.
Do we have the resources, though, to make sure that where a developer is, say, required to put in a row of street lamps, that they will do them? And I raise street lamps particularly because in my division I have a row of columns which don't have lamps on the top of them, and they've been like that for 5 years. So have we got the provision, the ability within our team to actually make these things happen?
We have. I think we have, Colin. You'd say that we do have the facility. Obviously, we're not overrun with staff, and that's true of the council as a whole. But we feel we have enough in the team to be able to do this.
And Councillor, in response to your specific question about streetlights, what we do is set out what we would need from a developer to make a road adoptable. And then we would only adopt it if we're satisfied it has met those criteria. So if, for example, it didn't have streetlights and that was part of the specification, then we would seek that before we adopted the road.
Yeah, unfortunately, Colin, in this case, the columns are on a county council road that's all already exists.
We won't go into
So we won't go into details, but Stephen, you accept from what you say, that there is that the staffing is tight on doing this.
Staffing is tight across the whole council.
That says it, Stephen. That says it all. Yeah, thank you. I think we're now going to have to move on, if we can, to minerals and waste and the local plan. And David or Chris, you want to come in on that?
Are you talking about the third question within the Harlow Gilston Garden Town?
Not at the moment. No, we've moved on from that one now, unfortunately. We might come back to it. And that's because we need to move on. Minerals and waste and local plan. We've moved on to. Sorry, Alison. So,
Terry, I can't see David or Chris on the call. It's Leslie here.
Yes, I can see you, Leslie. I can see you. Officers, can we not see those? Chris Alley and David Barnard? In which case, I'm not going to mess around. I'll ask the question then. How will the portfolio be addressing the risk of delays in the progress of the minerals and waste local plan?
Right. So, as members will know, the council is awaiting the outcome of the Ellenbrook Quarry appeal before progressing the minerals and waste local plan. This is because the site was allocated in the adopted plan and is also identified in the emerging plan. Officers have been preparing and testing a range of officers for the plan, depending on the outcome of the appeal. But the Director is confident that the plan can be progressed at pace once the appeal decision is known. Herts County Council recognises the current risk that it does not have a 7-year mineral supply, but has recently granted permission, but considers the likelihood of receiving speculative planning applications out of the blue and elsewhere to be low, given the time that minerals applications tend to take in coming forward. So we are confident.
Not only the applications, but also if it needs to go any further than just planning. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that really comes on to, and we'll let other members ask questions. We just finish this bit here. How will the decision about Ellenbrook Quarry impact the plan? I know you had some concerns about what it was going to generate and what it wasn't going to generate in terms of minerals. Where do we stand right now, Stephen?
Well, I think, as I said just a moment ago, we're waiting for the inspectors and then the Secretary of State who will decide it, who makes final decision. The appeal has obviously prevented the progress on the plan. It was in our included sites. We are, I was going to say confident, we're not confident, we're hopeful that it will be allowed so that it can progress. If it is not allowed, we will have to look again at sites outside of those in the plan at the moment, those in the immersion plan. But we're also confident that once we know one way or the other, we will be able to develop the emerging minerals plan rapidly and bring it through to conclusion.
Thank you. Ian, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. Thank you, Terry. It's aligned to that and the plan, and obviously, most importantly, the IP. I don't know, Stephen, whether you can comment on whether you think there's sufficient or indeed any funding in the IP for the proposed Northern Baldock waste transfer station.
Not something I have been dealing with. Colin, do you have more information on that?
Not part of my remit or budget, I'm afraid, so we'd have to come back to you on that one, Councillor. Yeah. I'll ask that question and get a separate answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions around minerals and waste of the local plan from members? John, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just quickly, just on picking up what Stephen was saying. You said you were confident you'd be able to progress the emerging minerals plan when the decision comes through on Ellenbrook. Obviously, that will be more straightforward if the decision approves the quarry. Are you comfortable that you have enough alternative sites to meet the requirements should the quarry site Ellenbrook be turned down?
Well, there are alternative sites. Clearly, there will be planning implications and local objections, as there always are to mineral sites. So it's not a necessarily straightforward situation, but it's one which we can deal with.
Yes, it's going to be a challenge. 8 million tonnes over 30 years was what that quarry was going to produce. And so if we have that gap in your waste and mineral plan, that is substantial. And to find the resources to do that, it could be a challenge. Yes. Any other questions around minerals and waste local plan? I don't see any hands coming up. So now we talk on to the important thing, which is the economic growth. Leslie, you want to come on economic growth?
Yes, fine. Right. A key priority listed to support Hertfordshire's futures to refresh the economic strategy and design. What are the Hertfordshire futures delivering?
Right. Well, lots going on with Hertfordshire futures. Their economic strategy was launched in July 2024, and the futures have been working through a substantial in-person and digital engagement programme with key partners and stakeholders across the county and indeed beyond. These include one or more bilateral sessions with the majority of district councils, usually involving both officers and the elected members, and regular briefings with Hertfordshire chief executives and leaders. Meetings with senior sector-specific business groups, for example, life sciences, and small medium businesses, including a business survey and an event for over 100 businesses and local stakeholders with Biz for Biz. Meetings with central government departments, DWP for example, and meetings with key partners, further educational principals and colleges. Discussions with broader partnerships, for example, the Interlink Enhanced Partnership annual bus event, and a workshop with Hertfordshire Infrastructure and Development. So plenty going on. We've been talking to local authorities, Central Bedfordshire and Luton, as well as Buckinghamshire Council, and we've been engaging with young people through a young person's survey targeted at those aged 16 to 24. As well as that, we've been carrying out extensive media targeting through earned and paid for editorial coverage. So plenty going on, yeah.
Thank you.
You want to come back on that, Leslie?
I was going to ask what steps are being taken to ensure that they're using the funds effectively and the outcomes monitored, please.
Well, now, yes.
And the impact in particular.
And yes. One moment. So the Herts Futures is primarily funded via external sources such as government departments and district and boroughs, which are subject to financial and performance management arrangements. Herts County Council operates as the accountable body for Hertfordshire Futures, so has oversight of funding. So we have a good idea of how the money is being spent. And as I say, we are the accountable body for Hertfordshire Futures. Underpinning this is the assurance framework, which sets out the arrangements in relation to governance, assurance and performance management. So I think we have a good control and a good knowledge of how the money is spent.
Thank you. Content with that, Leslie?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to come in and say about the next one, which is key priority, is the developments of 10,000 homes and 10,000 jobs. We're saying what kind of jobs we think we will create in sunny Hertfordshire, and I hope it's not all the cinema ones again, which we seem to create a lot of. What industries are being developed? How are we training Hertfordshire residents to meet the needs of these industries? Thoughts, please.
I think I'm not even sure 10,000 is right. I think we're looking at 100,000. Certainly in the longer period, we're looking for 100,000 homes and 100,000 jobs. Indeed, 10,000 is only a bit more than the Harlow-Gilston first tranche.
Could well be.
Yes, I think we're focusing particularly through the strategy on various sectors, including life sciences, and that is also agri-tech, digital technologies, which we know about, sustainable construction, and sustainable construction is very important in delivering the number of houses which we need to do in the county. as many of you will know, that building in bricks and mortar with soggy concrete and brickwork is not necessarily the ideal way to construct a house, and sustainable house building with modern materials and some element of prefabrication, I think, is very important. So we're looking at that. We're looking at advanced engineering, manufacturing and creative industries. I mean, we talk about the film, but it's also television, gaming and related technologies. Now, this does not preclude other high value industries and jobs. And as well, I mean, when you're talking about film industry, for example, and indeed agri-tech and life sciences, it's not just, if you like, the boffins doing it and the highly paid people, but it brings work for canteen managers, for construction workers, for people who drive others about. You know, it is a cascade of work which comes down from these industries. So there's plenty going on, dealing with the 4 further education colleges, looking at skills that are available and any more that we need to be provided. I have talked to one college about providing a planning course. We are short of planners, and we ought to have more planners trained up in Hertfordshire. Not necessarily easy to put on. I did even suggest that some of our officers might be available. I haven't talked to Colin about this. Some of our officers might be available to go and give the odd lecture at the college on planning, because apparently there aren't enough lecturers in planning to train planners. So it's a bit of a vicious circle, but plenty going on.
Chicken egg. And three perhaps industries which you didn't mention, which I'll mention. 1 is AI, 2 is astro, and 3 is pharmaceuticals. Which are 3 big industries. Certainly 2 of those are big industries, and the 3rd one may well become a big industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And Neil, you're on the call if you'd like to add anything to what I've just been saying.
Just to add some insight from linking a few things together, actually, in terms of the economic strategy, digital is becoming a major theme in terms of both the sort of economic opportunities for Hertfordshire, and in particular, we did all the sectors you talked about when we were developing action plans across those sectors. There's a similarity of their asks, which are centering on digital, so increasingly digital skills, access to technology, and physical infrastructure in terms of things like data centres. So one of those things that we're looking at as we take the strategy forward into the next phase is around the opportunity of Hertfordshire around convergent technologies, i.e. the digital needs in one sector are actually remarkably similar to another. So that will be something I think we'll be looking to bolster, and we're looking to have sort of almost cross-pollination of discussions across our sectors to make sure that we're meeting all their needs, but also potentially pitching back to government as Hertfordshire has a number of these growth sectors. Could we see an opportunity to pilot some new initiatives around convergent technologies and putting Hertfordshire at the centre of that industrial strategy going forward?
Thank you, Neil. Are we talking with the university about these things? I'll come to you, John, in a minute. Are we talking to the university, Herts University, about some of these things?
Absolutely. I did a presentation on the strategy to the what they have, the Chief Exec Group, which is essentially all the deans of the university and the Vice Chancellor, and they're very keen to be involved in those discussions. They're very keen because there's obviously a synergy between the assets they have and the key sectors as well. So yeah, they're heavily involved and they want to continue to be involved.
And we want them to continue to be involved. So coming first, John, and then I'll come to you after, Alison.
Yeah, some of the things that Stephen, you and Terry just mentioned are quite energy heavy. What is the relationship with people like UKPN and the other power providers? Are we comfortable that we all have a sufficient capacity to support this development?
Good question.
If I start, Colin may be more in a better position to answer, but we're aware that there is a trade-off, and you might have seen more recent announcements in the local press around data centres in around Hertfordshire. I think what we're trying to encourage is making sure that the energy usage, the energy demands, both in terms of electricity supply, but in terms of the energy used in terms of those data centres, that we can deploy them to other parts of the local areas for uses. I believe
Colin may be better informed than I on this, but for example, the proposed data centre down in Broxbourne is going to be used to help power a neighbouring school in terms of energy use and heating, etc. So we're trying to make sure that we're not missing out on the opportunity for that, so that energy produced by those data centres, which is not inconsiderable, is put to good use.
Colin, you want to say something?
Yeah, very quickly. We're working with the East of England Local Government Association on energy need for the whole region to make sure, you know, it's sustainable, it's coming from sustainable sources, and where there are things like data centres producing a lot of heat, we're looking at heat networks and things like that to connect to other industrial areas, other housing areas, and realise those win-win benefits that arise from them. So that will be an ongoing task.
And rest assured that the public will keep an eye on us, what we're doing as far as energy consumption is concerned. Alison, you want to come in?
Yes, please. I want to return to the matter of enforcement. We heard earlier today that in highways that there is absolutely no recruitment of enforcement officers. Particularly, this was to go after developers that were ruining verges, knocking things down, and not taking any responsibility for them. And we were told quite precisely, no recruitment. And I am concerned and would like to know whether this is the case for the earlier discussions we had about having the actual resources to make sure that the developers are doing what they say they are doing. Thank you.
But just Colin will answer you on this, but I would just say, remember that the local planning authorities have the first, in the first instance, will deal with their planning applications and enforcing breaches on their planning applications. So for Harlow Gilston, although we are party to the 106 agreements, we are not the planning authority. East Hertfordshire is. So East Hertfordshire will be the people in the first case who deal with any breaches and enforcement. Colin, do you want to say a bit more on that?
Well, before that, before you say that, yes, I'll get Colin to come in. Alison, you want to come back on that particular issue?
Yes, I do. Speaking for SADC, which is my own local, they don't have any enforcement officers. They're working with Watford, and there is no enforcement. So I hear what you say, Stephen, but I personally have not seen the system working.
Well, I can speak on behalf of some of it because at Development Control, we get regular feedback on enforcement. So we get regular feedback on where we're enforcing, where we're not enforcing. So we do see that every month on what the situation is. Colin, you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll attempt to reassure Councillor. What we do, first of all, we have conditions as part of planning applications so that developers are hopefully abiding by those, and therefore we are not creating any enforcement cases. We also have a monitoring officer who regularly visits waste and mineral sites to ensure those conditions being met, that the right amount of mineral is being extracted, material is being brought in within limits, etc. And then where we do need to, we have enforcement skills within the team, and we have the ability to serve notices, to issue stop notices, and then we will look very carefully if we need to go beyond that at the capacity for, you know, legal support, consultant support to take any prosecution action we may need to. So yeah, I'm confident we have the skills within the team to be able to take that forward on occasions where it's necessary.
And we are doing so, Colin, on certain cases at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, I know there's some going down. We've got about 1 minute left, so I'm just going to ask one last question. And sorry, Paul, I can't let you in. Is around the development of Brookfield and Baldock. That's going to have a significant impact. We know that that when we said about 100,000 houses and 10,000 at Gilston, there's 3,500 going at Baldock as well. I know, yeah, which we as a Herts County Council are doing, yeah.
Yeah, they are helping to deliver our numbers. Brookfield Development is the Riverside and the Garden Village schemes. Riverside scheme is 250 residential units, retail of 29,000 square metres, and commercial activities approximately 20,000 square metres of leisure and restaurants. As well as that, there's about 20,000 square metres of office space and a new civic hub. The Garden Village includes 1,250 houses, mixed-use neighbourhood centre, primary school, etc., etc. And At Baldock, we've got a development for 3,000 homes and with associated services, including new primary schools, a secondary school provision, SEND provision, and 196,000 square metres of employment land. So those two schemes go some way to our numbers.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I'm going to have to cut me short there. Thank you for your contributions. I'm getting a red flag waved at me. They might send me off. So thank you for your contributions. Sorry, Paul, I can't take your, Paul Zgowski, I can't take your question. We've run out of time, which is a shame really, because these sessions in the past have given us growing opportunity to really challenge, and I don't think we've had that this time around, but hopefully it'll improve next time around. So thank you, officers, and particularly thank you for the participants, the members who participated and those watching. And we will see you again, I think, at 4:10, which is when we look at some of the feedback we're going to get. So thank you once again, and goodbye.
Okay.
Yes, and thanks for
We're live, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this, the final session of our evidence gathering day, where we do a deep dive into the resources and performance portfolio. Good to see everybody. We have one substitution. Terry Duris is here substituting for Ken Crofton, who's been called away. We are short of time. We've got 10 minutes per. So if questioners can keep the questions relatively short, they are deliberately short. That'll give us probably 7 or 8 minutes for replies and responses. And the first question is going to be asked by Tim. Tim, crack on, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Yeah, just a quick question right at the start, really. It's an all-encompassing question, really. We all know council's finances up and down the countries are not in the best position, sort of thing. Has the county council got enough funding to fulfil all of its functions?
Okay, I'll start. As I understand it, we're not having, as it were, opening comments, so I won't provide opening comments unless someone corrects me. Tim, thanks for the question. Yes, you're obviously right. Everybody knows that our finances, like every other council's finances, are very challenged. I think the short answer to your question is yes. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that we work on our finances every day of the week, right through the year. It's not easy, but because we put so much effort in, the answer to your question is yes. I think you already know that we are proposing to spend another £128 million this year on our residents. But to get to that, we will have to find another 42 million savings and repurpose a transformation reserve and one or two other things like that. So it's by no means an easy task, but I think the answer to your question is yes. If Stephen or Scott want to add anything, they're very welcome.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I can just chip in. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tim, for the question. As Bob's outlined, we've got record investment going into services next year to help meet the extraordinary increases in demand we are seeing for our services. I don't know, all other sessions today have been really focusing on some of those aspects. Also, as part of the IP, as members will be aware, we publish a 4-year financial plan. And if we look across those 4 years, our budgets are broadly balanced for the majority of that period. That's quite unusual. In previous years, we've seen gaps and increasing gaps. But that is dependent on a number of factors. It's dependent on us being able to deliver a really substantial savings programme that increases to £95 million a year by the end of the IP period. And it assumes that some of those demand pressures don't increase at the same rate in future years as we've seen. So a number of assumptions in there, but if they hold and we can deliver those savings, then yes, across the 4-year IP, the position is looking good.
Thank you. And just briefly from myself, Scott Crudgington, Exec Director for Resources. One of the things I think we would certainly warmly welcome, certainly from an officer's perspective, is the government's intention to issue a comprehensive spending review over the coming 6 months, which will hopefully then allocate funding to our sector, and then hopefully then down at a council level for the next 3 years. That helps to give us certainty. We may not necessarily like the news, we may not necessarily like the allocations, but we would at least be able to plan over a medium term. And that's not to say I know other governments, previous government has tried to do that, but with the impacts of COVID, with the various different changes that there's been in the financial markets, it's been very difficult for government to be able to commit to that sort of 3-year period. But the early indications are that we should now be able to get that. And then just the point on demand, really the demand aspects of our budget. With a £1.2 billion budget that we're discussing today, that nearly on 75% of that is in relation to, is addressing or responding to social care challenges and demand, and that percentage of our total budget is continuing to grow. So again, that only then puts further pressure on the wider discretionary elements of what the council's been able to decide to be, but it's done its very best to protect that.
Excellent. Anything further, Tim? If not, I'll come in with a quick question. I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much, really, and I appreciate those 3 responses there. Basically, no, I do appreciate also the spending review next autumn for a 3-year period does give a bit of certainty, but yes, you're right, we're not sure how that's going to be good or not, something. And yes, I do appreciate adult care services and children's services. The demand is there, and we don't know when that's going to level off, if it ever levels off, to be fair. Yeah, but no, I still got my concerns over the overall financial aspects of all councils. I'm not going to just say Arts Council. I noticed Stephen Pillsworth, as our Section 151 officer in the IP, did do quite a report there. And yes, it can be read negatively, it can be read positively, but there are concerns out there. There's no doubts on that.
I think, David, if I can come back on that, please.
Yes, please,
I
Bob.
think I don't know that anybody in this call would broadly disagree with what you just said there, Tim. It is the case that the financial position is very, very challenging. I would like just to endorse Scott's comments, which you've acknowledged, Tim, which is in the main, the challenge arises because we face this burgeoning demand for children's and adult services, which we are obliged to meet. And of course, Scott's absolutely right that it would help us enormously, but help all councils enormously if we had more certainty about government funding. I am going to mention national insurance. The increase in employers' national insurance will cost this council about 20 million. And that is, we could do with that like a shot in the head. It's really, really challenging. And I think another reason, I mean, again, you know, I say this quite a lot, but it is true, as you know, we do have a national reputation for the sound financial management of our council. And one of the reasons for that is because we're not complacent. We acknowledge these challenges. We're not pretending they're not there. We work very, very hard on them. And of course, you're right to acknowledge that Stephen's a Section 151 officer. I would just like, since you mentioned that, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say that we wouldn't have never and will never pressure Stephen into signing off on something that he's not comfortable with, and would apologise for embarrassing him because he's on the call now, obviously. I thought his sign off for this IP was extremely well measured. You know, I think he conveyed his sense of where we are. So the answer, come back to your first question, the answer is that yes, we do have enough money, but we have to keep working on it, and provided we do, we'll be okay. Thank you.
Bob, you've bombed out my own question, but it was a supplementary, so I'm going to have to sacrifice it in. But I'd just like to say, from my point of view in this section, that I think it's I think it's admirable and invigorating that we still have the appetite to look to make investments where that is going to, you know, produce a projected return on that investment. I would hope that continues.
Well, I'm conscious
moving now.
David, I'm conscious that Stephen's got his hand up, so we should hear what he has to say. But if I might just say, another element of our management of the financial position of the county council is transformation. I think everybody on the call, particularly the longer standing members, know that we have a fantastic record of transformation. We don't let the waters thicken up around us. We're forever looking to improve the way we do things and enhance the way we do things. Look at organisational resourcing. We've undergone this big programme of reorganisation, and that will save us £16 million a year going forward. So, you know, it's things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just very quickly, as Tim mentioned it, so as the council's chief finance officer, I need to formally write a report known as the Section 25 report around the budget and our level of reserves. And I think in summary in there, you can see there's a lot of positives I'm flagging in the budget, that record investment in services, but equally I'm flagging the finances of this council, and indeed pretty much every other council in the country, have never been tighter. We've had to trim down our contingency. We've been using reserves in recent years. So there's much less flexibility than there was previously if we start to see some further demand pressures, or if actually some of our savings plans slip. So if anything like that starts to happen, we'll need to take swift action to bring things back on track in year.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. Right, I'm going to go over to Jonathan now, who has a question around property.
Thank you, Chairman. In the draft budget, there's a section marked key revenue pressures and property and estate pressures. What are the current pressures then concerning the property team, and really how likely is that likely to change perhaps in the next 3 years?
Jonathan, thanks for the question again. I'll kick off, and I think Sass is on the call and she'll come in to amplify my response. I think the thing about property, Jonathan and everybody, is that in the context of resources, it's not quite, you know, boring business as usual. We have a very diverse property estate. We have 10 or 11,000 acres in the rural estate, and we have about 2,000 property assets in total, including schools. As people know, I've been the cabinet member for this portfolio for 4 years now. I think our property function is good. I think it's agile. I think they can see opportunity when it arises. For example, as everybody should know by now, we became aware of an opportunity to purchase office space that we currently rent in a location that we call Apsley, and we moved very fast to take that up and acquire that. And that will convert us from being a tenant into a landlord, and that will save us a considerable amount of money every year going forward. So they're quite nimble on their toes. We have one or two interesting projects underway. Again, I hope everybody knows that we have a solar farm project that's just moving along quite interestingly. That's off the A414, heading out kind of St Albans way. We've got some interesting thinking underway in respect of biodiversity net gain projects. So we're pretty nimble, but yeah, it's a big portfolio. There's a lot to do. And if I could also say, Jonathan, that again, as I think everybody knows, we've built a number of schools, in recent times, and a number of those have been very highly acclaimed in national awards. I think Saswell will amplify, but in particular, there's a school at Buntingford that we built, which is very highly regarded in terms of its eco credentials. So, it's a big portfolio. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of variety in it. But I think we keep it fresh and we keep it moving. I might also just say, of course, it's important in terms of capital receipts. If we can raise capital receipts, and that takes pressure off our finances because it costs money to finance capital. So that's another very important thing that property do. Enough from me, I think.
Paul, did you want to come in?
I did, yes, because I did notice in the IP the almost £10 million that we're spending purchasing the freehold on office space, because obviously that's quite an interesting thing to be doing in the situation where a huge number of councils are divesting themselves of office space. We're in the position where we are actually purchasing office space. We're in the situation also where we have reorganisation of council to reorganise how and where office spaces are delivered. So I would raise the question, especially given Councillor Deering's ending point there, that divesting ourselves of capital assets to generate receipts to actually bolster our revenue position is being one of the things that we want to do. The purchase of an office building seems, on the face of it at least, to be diametrically opposed to the direction of travel that we would like to see this happen. So
Paul, I don't want to stop your flow, but this is not a debate. We really have to focus on questioning because we need to extract as much. Could you close on the question for me?
Well, the question is, when are we going to see the nuts and bolts of the cost-benefit analysis of that particular thing? Because, frankly, there has to be a question in my mind, having the information I've got, as to whether that's an appropriate and wise decision.
Chairman, I do have an answer to that, but I can see that Jonathan and Scott have their hands up already, so I'll let them, with your permission, let them go first.
Well, mine was a slightly separate question, so perhaps Scott might want to come in first, and then I'll come in after you've answered Paul's question.
Yeah, no problems. So just on the point of us, does it feel counterintuitive at the moment about us going into looking to seek to purchase office accommodation at this point? I think it's important just to say at this stage, we are working through a negotiation with the vendor to see whether a purchase is possible. But they have been previously sold interest in the sister site just across the way that was part of the original development, and the actual development has also been able to achieve a level of planning permission for I think housing or care facilities or whatever the case may be. So irrespective of whether the long-term need for this property that we would be purchasing in Apsley was for office accommodation, we will also be able to keep its value in possibly other uses in the future as well. So I absolutely understand we can't forecast what the future of local government's going to be like in the next couple of years because of all of the local government review, etc. But nonetheless, there is a saving we can make through the short term against leasing costs versus effectively the mortgage costs, but there's also other options in which we'll be able to do with that property over the medium to long term. But however, I should caveat that this is still a live negotiation with the vendor, and nothing is yet concluded.
And if I may come in, Chairman, very quickly, of course, Paul, it's not all one-way traffic. I mean, you know, as somebody on this call has said, and everybody knows, we are a £1.2 billion a year organisation. It can't simply be a case that there's only one direction in terms of property disposals or acquisitions. Another area where we've been looking to acquire property is in relation to children's accommodation, so that we can bring some of our children who have been accommodated outside of Hertfordshire back into Hertfordshire. And I think, broadly speaking, that's regarded as a win-win because it brings our children back to nearer their families in the county, and that should also be economically positive. So it's not a one-way traffic. And just to finish on Apsley, as Scott says, the negotiation's live, but absolutely, I'm sure that the figures stack up, and you can be further informed once the negotiation is concluded. But yeah.
Just to respond really to that,
I'm sorry, Paul. We don't have time for responses. I need to move on. Jonathan.
Yeah, in relation to what Scott was just saying, so when the draft budget refers to conducting a property rental analysis for savings of £200,000, is that all sort of part of it in a way?
That'll be part of that, absolutely. The difference between there may well be some other aspects of where we look to make savings against rent by maybe sort of through capital purchase, but certainly in relation to the Apsley scheme, there is a saving built into the IP that's linked to effectively the difference between the borrowing and interest costs in relation to the purchase versus what the leasing costs are likely to be. And there is actually a break clause coming up, a lease renegotiation that's going to be due in the coming few years, and we would expect that leasing charges to go up during that period as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, Paul, if you're very, very quick, I can let you slip your. I've got 1 minute.
The response that I was trying to elucidate was that, you know, clearly, if we are spending more than £50 million a year currently on servicing the debt, taking on yet more debt is something that we ought to scrutinise, don't you think?
Okay, thank you for that. We'll feed that
Well,
into the process.
David, I'll respond to that. I mean, the answer is yes, and there has been scrutiny, and there is scrutiny now, and there will continue to be scrutiny. But again, if you, as I'm sure you have done, Paul, if you look at the numbers in the papers in front of you, you'll see that our capital programme is actually reducing over the 4-year period of this IP quite significantly.
Okay, thank you for your help and your understanding, members and officers. So we are still on track, so that's good. And I'm going to invite Fiona to ask her a question.
Thank you. Thank you. I hadn't intended to ask a question about organisational resourcing, OR. In the final year of the financial year 2025, the council undertook a major transformation programme called Organisational Resourcing, or OR for short, which will enable us to make significant savings and transform the way we work. In response to the continued financial and operational challenges we face, organisational resourcing will deliver up to £16 million a year from 25-26, which will be critical to protecting the services for the county's 1.2 million residents. How does HCC plan to continue to attract, recruit and retain an effective workforce while still achieving the £16 million savings proposed?
Fiona, thanks for the question. I'm very conscious that we're very tight on time. So I'm just going to say, by way of my answer to your question, yes. Organisational resourcing has gone well. Actually, one of the things it's done is enhanced career progression for a number of people. But otherwise, I'm going to let Scott, who is closer to the implementation of it than I am, come in and just add some comments.
Thank you, Councillor Deering, and thank you, Councillor Guest. This has been a major change programme that the council has been sort of tackling over the last year, and very much of it was driven by the financial challenges that we've been facing. So it would be disingenuous for me to be able to state that, you know, the primary aim always was about us being able to meet a significant savings target of £16 million per annum ongoing. What we've needed to do is really look at the way that the council operates and across our 5 key departments, and looking where we can remove duplication, where we've been able to actually make processes a bit more efficient than they had been done previously, etc. So all of that has been now looked at, and we've been able to. We were forecasting upward of 400 possible headcount reduction to achieve that savings target. That was a simple mathematical calculation. But nearer the end of the because of all the hard work with matching people to vacant roles elsewhere in the council, we're expecting that the level of redundancies will turn out to be less than 100. Now that doesn't take away from the fact of us losing extremely valuable and experienced staff, but nonetheless we were simply living outside our means as a result of the amount of funding that we currently receive. So going forward, we continue to need to be an attractive council for people to want to work here, and continue to want to apply for jobs, and obviously get promoted within the organisation. And I think that I need to be clear that really that we continue to be and pride ourselves on being a good employer that continues to provide sort of great opportunities for career development through the organisation, through good, strong training and development arrangements in place. So because without that, the actual cost of losing people, and then the cost of recruitment, the loss of expertise for a workforce now that we believe we've now moved the organisation down to a size of workforce that we can sustain, and Stephen's outlined within his opening point around the overall budget, that we are starting to look at all things being equal today. If everything stayed the same based on our projections, then we would be about balanced over the next few years. So therefore, that would indicate we can afford the workforce that we have today, post organisational resourcing. So we have to work doubly hard in a very competitive market to make sure that people continue to enjoy working at the council. We're just about to launch a staff survey to really learn how people are feeling post these changes, because they have been bruising, they have been difficult for a number of teams, and we've built new teams and we're bringing new people together to work together for the first time. But we hope that we can sort of create a joint endeavour now, and to continue to invest in people's development and make sure that we continue to be an attractive employer.
Thank you. I'd like to follow that up with particularly on recruitment. That is, where recruitment is required, despite the recruitment freeze that we've got, has OR had any impact on recruitment?
At the moment, I would say that it's not. We're continuing to see a reasonably healthy response to adverts that we're putting out. I've been involved in some recent recruitment for a director of people, director of HR post recently, and we ended up attracting a very good field, which again I think does sort of show testament to the reputation of us as an organisation and as an employer. I would say that with the uncertainty that the white paper will be bringing about for, you know, I mean, no comment about the approach that ultimately we will go to within Hertfordshire, whether we move to unitary councils, a mayor, elected mayor for Hertfordshire. All of those things are being discussed at the moment. But it will create uncertainty for people to move around the sector at this point, because there'll be people in district councils that won't know whether those districts have got a long-term future. You've got a county council that will be moving possibly into a unitarisation of possibly 1, 2, 3 different councils. So all of this could lead to a level of uncertainty for staff, and they may well decide not to be active in the recruitment market until that settles down. So if I was to outline a risk to you, it would be really local government review being more of a risk to us at the moment, rather than the issues of organisational resourcing.
Excellent, thanks, Scott. Okay, I think I can't see any other interest. Oh, Ian.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you, David. Scott, it'd be interesting to understand what you think is the grade mix as we go through the organisation review, because clearly you can actually achieve the numbers, but actually over a period of time, by increasing the seniority levels within your grade mix, you can actually not just reduce the cost, but you can actually begin to increase them again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the actual target operating model that we put in place as a result of organisational resourcing. There was very much a need to make sure that we don't end up finding ourselves overly management heavy, where there isn't actually enough sort of staff that are delivering the job day to day, whether that be up front line or within the support services. So there was some very clear guardrails or guidelines that were put in place about ratios now that we're looking to see between leadership levels and the sorts of numbers of staff that they should be looking at. They were guidance, because at the end of the day, there's always some teams can actually absorb much greater spans of control. There's some other areas that are very specialist that you would want a very narrow span of control. But all of those guardrails are in place, and we will be making sure that we, best to put it, is very much going to make sure that we continue to monitor and audit that, to make sure that we don't find ourselves drifting away from that model over, which does happen. I've seen it before. Over a number of years, you find you drift away. I think it's really important, so we don't have to go back to doing these programs anytime soon, that we stick to these principles that we've agreed.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Can I just thank you. Sorry, Ian. Can I just very quickly come in and comment on Fiona's second question? I'm sure you have in mind, Fiona, that we've been very successful in recruiting for our SEND provision. We have a SEND academy, and we've recruited about 138 people for that. So that was obviously very good and speaks very well of the council. And it's not quite in point, but I do also just want to remind people that over the years, we've done the best we can to make sufficient funding available to our adult care providers so that they can pay their people in excess of, the basic national living wage and whatnot. And that's been a really pretty important part of our adult care operation. It's meant that our providers can recruit people and keep them, and then in turn we can maintain the service that we provide in conjunction with the third party providers. So yeah, I mean, it's a perfectly sensible question, but in principle, I think we're doing okay.
Excellent. Well, on that note, I'll draw this section of the meeting to a close, thanking officers for attending and contributing. Members? Sorry, note from behind. And particularly thank you to Afana for acting as our SSO and bringing us to this point. It's been very useful working with her, and I wish her the best in her career with HCC. Could I ask that members of this particular group stay put, and we'll have a few moments just to mull over where we might take the recommendations. So thank you, everybody. If those that are not group members would like to depart, can I have
Thank
good
you all.
wishes?
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.
We're live now.
See, you should be in charge of buttons.
Okay, no further ado. Thanks for your input thus far. I'm going to hand over to Tim, who will take us recommendations and bring them together for us.
Okay, thank you, David. I'll just share my screen to make it a little bit easier for members. We'll follow the same format that we did for any of those of you who were with us for the summary and recommendations session this morning, which looked at the first 4 portfolios. So this will just be looking at portfolios 5 through 8. I'll start with children, young people and their families. Members were asking about the national shortage of independent placements for children with additional needs, and also were told about the increase in both the number of children needing support and the complexity of their needs. Officers and portfolio members outlined the early help model to prevent children coming into care, into the care system, and managing their needs as far as possible at home through family safeguarding service. And also officers outlined the managing the supply side issues by increasing our own local provision of in-house places to be less reliant on independent homes, and by investing in fostering and adoption placements. So I don't know whether members want to take just a moment to think about whether they have any recommendations in that area. I felt it was a very comprehensive answer, actually, to the question that was raised. No? Okay, I'll move us along, although obviously do shout out if you're just having trouble getting off mute or something. So the second area that members inquired about was around managing the impact of increasing fostering and adoption allowances. They were told that these are by and large set nationally by central government, and also the national shortage of foster carers was outlined. We heard about the work that Hertfordshire County Council is doing with Foster East to tackle that shortage of supply. Officers also talked about the fact that costs have increased for those allowances, but they still represent a considerable saving in comparison to independent residential provision. So I suppose it's a comparative. Yes, it's a cost increase, but it's still cheaper than the alternative. Did members have anything that they wanted to recommend around that second area? I can see a hand, but I can't see who it is. Mark.
Oh God. Oh, good. I'm sorry, I'm waiting for my microphone to go live. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I raised that question, and Rachel Adler made the point that there is an opportunity or Fed County does apply that opportunity to increase allowances over the statutory level to presumably encourage more people to become foster carers, more likely to be. And I just wonder whether there is more opportunity for even further increase in those allowances. Would that be more successful in attracting people in? And we because of the shortage of time, we didn't really debate why people came to Hertfordshire, particularly more than independents. But I wonder whether that's the allowances may be a factor there. So whether we can put that in as a recommendation to review the level of allowances that we pay our foster carers, to see whether that would help reduce the need to use independence and therefore reduce our net expenditure. Spending to save, you might say.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can all see it coming up on the screen as Jim types it and you can concur. Conflicts, okay. Thanks, Fiona, we got that. Okay, we'll do that, make that change. First line, first paragraph, seventh word is additional. The owner is suggesting we change it. Complex. Oh, I thought you changed that. No, sorry, I'm just against. Trading against. Costs, yeah, residential costs.
I'll type these up, but okay, so sorry. First line,
we've got additional, word 7. Children with additional needs.
Yeah.
Fiona suggesting that we should read complex needs.
Thank you. Okay, oh, sorry. Right. The third point then was around providing clarity around the specific budget line. Oh, sorry, Mark, you've still got a hand up. Are you?
Sorry, I don't.
No, that's fine. As long as it's a legacy hand, and I'm not. I'm
yeah,
not.
it's a legacy. It normally drops on its own accord. It has gone now, I think.
Okay, so the third point, members were seeking clarity around specific budget lines here. So what SSE2 was referring to in terms of inflation, and what D7 was referring to in terms of that being demographic pressures. Supplementary was asked about what changes have been made to modelling of democratic pressures. You're absolutely right.
Demographic.
That should be demographic. I'm just so democratic that I.
And you came from Hansard.
Okay. And how confident we about the estimate in this?
You don't have to do it now, but I would have thought that some explanation of SSE2 and D7 might be needed in.
Yeah, but Tim, thanks for that. Yeah, Tim will fill that in.
Yeah.
Without necessarily holding us up.
Okay, and then the final one was the impact of proposed budget on quality of services, quality of externally provided placements, and members received some reassurance about how the quality of external provision was monitored and managed, and officers talked about the brokerage services that do that work to ensure that external providers offer value for money. So I don't know whether there was anything additional around that area that members wanted to add. No?
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll move us on then to education, libraries and lifelong learning. And I know that members met after the portfolio session to discuss those. So I'm just putting up what's been reflected back to me from that session. So the first point there is we'd recommend the council keep lobbying government for more funding and for a fairer distribution of that funding. Okay, are we happy with that?
Yeah, we are, because what the point of that one was, even if we can't get a bigger cake, we're not getting our fair share of the cake in Hertfordshire.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah. Okay, so second point there was we recommend that the council develop a Plan B contingency should additional funding not become available and a Section 114 is issued. This plan should make clear which services would be affected by the necessary cuts.
Can we change cuts to changes? Would you mind all three if we change cuts to changes? They may not be cuts.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine by me. Yeah, sorry, we were in a bit of a rush, so yeah, bit of nuance is fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you. Well, let's put it bluntly. The only places that you could make those cuts are the non-statutory services. So I think probably the clarity is absolute from the word go. It ain't children's services, it ain't adult services, it's highways and the other stuff that we do.
Yeah, that's really a recommendation that could go across the top, couldn't it?
I admire the foresight, because clearly we can't control the funding, and if we are in that situation, but I think the clarity exists. It's pretty damn obvious where it will fall. What we need to do is to bearing in mind the pending change, or not change, but the pending, what's the word I'm searching for, tendering for our highways contract. We want to make sure, we should be sure that the capacity to make those cuts, if they become necessary to meet our statutory services, are embedded in the contracts that we place.
Above my pay scale.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, if members are content, I'll move on to point 3. We recommend that communication and wellbeing in schools remains prioritised to assist with staff retention. Okay, and then final one then from ELLL was we recommend a whole system review of the EHCP and the appeals process, including developing more robust forecasting and a review of access criteria.
So the background to this for you is that the number of EHCPs has been going up dramatically. So we, as a county council, have been putting more money in, but obviously, so that's the nuances of all the different words, because it's actually quite difficult, I think, for officers to predict. But it's key. It's, you know, SEND is a headline that we're all concerned about in all parties.
Yeah, I think that sort of came out. Part of that came out of there seemed to be a recurring message that we were being hit by unexpected demand, and although it was a national problem, it was still not being, you know, we kept being behind the curve when it came to demand for EHCP, demand for residential services, etc. So that's sort of where that bit came from.
Excellent, thank you.
Does that assist him?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I'll
sounds to me like a triage system.
Yeah. Okay, I'll move us on to the next portfolio, which was sustainable economic growth. The first area that we looked at here was the risks around Gilston Garden Town. Members heard that the Section 106 was signed, no indication yet of any call-in. Partners have sought legal advice, very few direct financial risks and implications for HCC. Financial obligations are subject to an index-linked provision. So despite the long-term nature of the project, HCC is protected, reasonably confident that developers meeting their obligations. Team monitors receipts under the Section 106 and work with developers to plan and ensure viability of future work. Was there anything else that people wanted me to thrash out in any recommendation there?
Just reading it, just a minute.
I think you are right to say reasonably confident, because I don't know that I have full confidence at all in that the staff is actually available. So I think reasonably confident, to me, it encapsulates how we ended up.
Yeah.
And it should be a capital S and no full stop before 106. That's just being pedantic, sorry.
Sorry, Terry, say again.
And S106 should be a capital S and no full stop.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to be pedantic.
No, that's
there's no full stop.
Absolutely required.
And then down the bottom, that's it.
Just a point about the HCC is protected. And obviously, if there is an HCC in years to come, that's correct. But how does that affect what becomes, in this context, you know, HCC, Harlow Council, East Herts Council, Essex County Council, and Epping Forest District Council? I mean, are they also protected? I don't know.
I suppose they would benefit from the protection that I was talking about there, in so much as it's about, despite it being a 40-year project, because those costs are index linked. The authority, whatever the authority might be in the future, would get the value of the an amount of cash today regardless of inflation in the future, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's just about the protection that index linking gives. But I appreciate the point. It might be better if I just say the council, and then if it does become something else, it will still apply.
Okay. Councils, just councils, yeah?
Yeah.
The councils are protected.
Thank you.
Super.
Okay. This second bullet point, I'm afraid I dropped out just because something else came up. So I've got some question marks here, which hopefully members will be able to help me fill in. So we were asking how we're addressing the risks of delays in progress on the related to the minerals and waste plan. There was a supplementary question with an ask to come back on further detail on something, but unfortunately I got sidetracked and don't remember what it was. So
Miles probably best.
Yeah,
I can expand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because
excellent.
It was part again the impact of Ellenbrook Quarry appeal. I think was we wanted until that appeal comes through, we won't know where we stand on the plan. That was the way I understood it. And if somebody knows anything different.
Let's come back on the impact of
Ellenbrook Quarry. Ellenbrook Quarry, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So the answer that I heard for that was that there are alternatives. It would be challenging, but there are alternatives to consider.
Yes, it was 8 million tons. Yeah.
Yeah.
30 years. Richard, you got something to add?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I feel very uncomfortable about a public assertion that there are alternatives, no matter how damaging. The appeal basically is founded around objections to that quarry, which was put into our plan because we decided it was necessary. So if there are alternatives, why the hell did we put those forward? And that is a very uncomfortable position, and I don't like it.
Terry will have a view on this, but having been engaged with the process, it wasn't so much being unhappy with taking the 8 million tons of minerals out of that hole. It was the way it was being done and the effect it would have on the local population could be ameliorated, we felt. But I don't think there's any value in going down that slippery slope.
I just wonder if we can amend the response there so as not to dig a bloody hole under us.
I agree with you. I think there was no details, so perhaps we could ask, instead of saying yes, it will be a challenge, could we ask, please, what are the alternatives?
Well, Briggins is the obvious alternative.
Yes.
Which will be coming forward.
We didn't hear that, so could we say no? We want to know what the alternatives are.
Okay, I have no problem with that. Full stop.
What do you think, Richard?
I just don't want to dig a hole under this authority, bearing in mind that I had the privilege of holding this particular portfolio many years ago and fully understand the necessity to contribute to the production of available minerals. Otherwise, we're never ever going to meet the housing targets and the other targets. It's a national register, and frankly, if we put ourselves into a position where we weaken ourselves by wording in the public domain about an appeal, we could lose it by default, and that has nothing to do with the merits of the situation. I'm not arguing about that. I'm just thinking we need to be careful about the language that we use.
Yes, you said dig yourself a hole. It's a bloody big hole. It takes a million tons out of it.
Absolutely, you take my point precisely. Of course, as I always knew you would.
Okay, I think that recommendation to seek alternative plans in the event that this does not go ahead. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, then the next point was around economic growth.
Can I still go? sorry, I'm patient in leaving my hand up and not just.
Oh, sorry, Ian. I can't see. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see that.
No, that's fine. No, I mean I agree with that alternative wording. That makes we need a plan B. I think that's the. I mean, I'm not saying it needs to be in here, but I did ask a further question of whether there was funding in the IP for the Northern Transfer Station, which Colin said he was going to come back to us on.
Okay.
Because obviously we've got a project in there mentions the Eastern Transfer Station, but it's less clear about what's happening on the Northern Transfer Station. Hence the reason I asked the question.
Yeah, can I suggest then? I mean, we're sort of veering away slightly from recommendations and into requesting informatives. So, yeah, that might be. I'll discuss it with Tim, but it's requesting further information.
I don't recollect that coming up because I could have made a comment on it, of course.
On what, Terry?
On that Northern Transfer Station, I did.
Well, I did. Well, I asked the question.
I don't remember.
I asked a question about it. Colin said he didn't know, and he'd come back to us.
Yeah, doesn't ring a bell.
I'm not sure we need to. I'm not sure. I think a reminder to Colin on that. Do we need to? Is it bringing value to the recommendation to have that in there?
No.
I'm just posing the question. I'm not making a statement.
I think it does add value, but then I asked the question.
We can't mix the transfer station, no, with minerals spelt correctly, yeah. Minerals and waste plan. We can't mix those two up. Either they're separate, yeah, or one, or the same one has to go.
And can I suggest then we have a separate line, not in there with the minerals, and a separate line just saying that the officer
is going to come back. It's not linked to the Ellenbrook quarry appeal and the event that's going to the quarry.
Yeah. But it is linked to the mineral and waste plan.
I don't dispute that, but it is not anything to do with 8 million tonnes, is it?
No. I agree with that. Yeah.
The water transfer station is for recycling, yeah?
Ian, would you be happy if we put a strap line in just saying the committee were interested to know, panel was interested to know more about the forthcoming plans for the Bulldog West? Yeah.
Terry's dead
Comfortable with that?
two separations.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, it's going to be on the Bulldog site, isn't it? So.
Yes.
Okay, so just moving on then to the fourth point was around economic growth and asked for information about what Hertfordshire Futures are delivering. There was talk about the economic strategy that was launched in 2024, working with district councils, meetings with CEOs, sector-specific business groups, meetings with central government and key partners. Gave the example of colleges. There was a supplementary question about how we're monitoring the impact and expenditure of funds. Members were told that Herts Futures is primarily funded through central government and district borough councils. HCC, however, is the accountable body and has an assurance framework which gives us good oversight and confidence. Was there anything additional that members wanted around that point?
I think the only thing where you've got Herts Futures there, put brackets after words Herts Futures and put ex-LEP or something. Because the LEP was what it was, and the LEP doesn't exist anymore. It's now Hertford Futures.
Yeah.
Okay, just so people understand. They might understand futures versus LEP. That's all. You don't need to do it a second time, just that once. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Because HCC is now accountable for Hertford Futures, whereas before it was a split responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The next point then was around the plans for 100,000 homes and 100,000 jobs. We were told that they're focusing on particular industry areas, including life sciences, agri-tech, construction industries, advanced engineering, entertainment and film industries, AI and digital skills. I didn't know whether there was anything additional that members wanted to hear around that.
Pharmaceuticals, because the largest GlaxoSmithKline facility, $1 billion, is in Stevenage.
Yeah.
And they do employ a lot of people. And of course, it is very much under challenge. Yeah?
Thank you.
I think the actual question was, what is if I remember, was what, how is this, how are they upskilling, as the phrase is, the actual residents, the employers within the. So I'm not too sure that we actually got an answer. I was assuming that we would be talking to the schools, to the universities.
Well, that's what
did I miss something?
We did
that
ask
said,
universities, didn't we? He said he's been to colleges, and we did ask the question: are the universities heavily involved in this? And he said, yes, been to the university. So, because we did ask that question of who he's talking to about these, the 100 homes, and particularly the 100,000 homes, and particularly 100,000 jobs. Yeah, we did say he was talking with the Arts University because I asked that question. So,
okay.
Okay, and then the final point was revisiting the earlier point that we'd made, that members had made around transport, around enforcement. And members were advised that districts and boroughs are, in the first instance, the responsible planning authorities for enforcement. I don't know whether.
I just don't think that is the answer. John Hale provided the example of 5 years of lampposts without lamps. I have completely destroyed verges outside a development, and the district authority is simply saying, you own the verges, we don't. We've done all we can. You must, please. In other words, they're actually asking HCC, if not to take over, then certainly to help. And that's where I'm worried that there is actually sufficient, indeed, any enforcement staff to help with this.
Would you be happy for me to pick that up, though, under the sort of highways and transport portfolio, seeing as the same recommendation was being made there, Alison? I just wonder whether we might get more traction having one recommendation from one of the groups that covers that issue.
I would be happy with that. As I listened in, I know that it was discussed, even though I wasn't on the panel. So yes, I would be happy with that.
Yeah, and I made the suggestion, I think, from the chair that there should be a reinvigoration of any relationship between highways and the local planning authorities around the sort of conditions that they would hope the local planning authorities might put in to a planning application to protect our verges, our roadside vistas and footways, etc.
Yeah, before you move on, Richard, you got your hand up.
Yeah, only because I was going to make exactly that point. So it's been made, and I shan't reiterate it. It should go in the planning conditions so that there's a hook to hang enforcement on.
Here.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard. I'll make sure that's picked up in that recommendation then.
Well said.
Well, I think if we're going to do it under highways, I'm happy for a recommendation like that to go in, providing the chairman of Scrutiny agrees that we have the capacity to do that. Otherwise, alter that one.
No, I think it belongs rightly in highways because it's a highways enforcement matter, and it's the two enforcement elements that need to get together. Planning at
content,
district and boroughs and our people. There's a disconnect, and we need to
connect it.
Link them back.
Okay, and then finally, then I'll move us on to the resources and performance portfolio. Three points here. I realised that starting.
Oh, what have we got to do? Press a button quickly. We're having a panic here because we're just about to lose you because we got.
Where's the?
It'll turn off.
Yeah, I need the TV remote though. Where is the?
It's here. Oh, yeah. Okay, we're back in the room.
Apologies for that. Right.
Can we take out the word however in the first bullet point, please?
I feel like I was starting in the middle of a sentence there. Always helpful. So members were reassured that the Hertfordshire County Council is in a position to be able to set a budget which meets its statutory obligations. The 4-year financial plan sets a broadly balanced budget across the period. However, it is dependent on delivering against savings, the savings plan, and that some of the demand pressures decline in line with projections. There was a broad welcome for the government aims to deliver a comprehensive spending review, as even if the answer to that is challenging, it will reduce uncertainty. Members noted that it was positive to see the inclusion of investment where it will really lead to returns for the council. Was there anything that anybody wanted me to amend, add, or?
Yeah, there's no recommendation there, but it's good.
There's no recommendation.
It's valid as far as I'm concerned.
I would prefer members were told that Hertfordshire County Council rather than reassured. I might be reassured, but I was actually told.
Yeah, fair point. You and Terry home running the pedantry society.
So bullet point 2 then was around the property function. There was a discussion of investment in a number of areas, including office accommodation at Apsley, which would turn the council from tenant to landlord, thus delivering savings. Outlined plans about a solar farm as well. There was a supplementary question about the office accommodation purchase and reassurance given that regardless of future council accommodation requirements, that the purchase will have other options which continue to make it a sound return on investment. And also wanted to note that particular purchase is currently in negotiation rather than concluded. So
does it for me. Your chairman is content.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. The wonderful thing about getting to this last point of the day is that resistance dies down.
No. There's another pedant in the room. It's not just Terry and Ian. You've got to be careful. And Mike.
Me.
Yes.
Then final bullet point here then was around a question around organisational resourcing, and members were told that the primary aim was always to be able to deliver against the savings target as the council couldn't afford the headcount that it had. However, officers are confident that the council continues to be able to offer attractive opportunities to retain the highly skilled workforce that it needs. I think the highly skilled bit might be my addition. So if
Well, I don't think it's unfair.
And then
there are exceptions, obviously.
Thank you. There was acknowledgement, though, that it had been a very difficult and challenging time. And there was a supplementary question about are we still able to recruit where it was needed, and some assurance was given that we'd had positive responses to recent recruitment activity. However, it is acknowledged that we do acknowledge the risks presented by local government reorganisation, although obviously that remains a bit of an unknown. So, was there anything that members wanted me to add to that? I realise that these are not necessarily worded as recommendations yet, but what I'll do is work on them to craft them to be less like statements, more like recommendations. Okay.
Guys, I've got to go. Thank you so much. It's been a lovely day.
We couldn't have done it without you, Richard.
Cheerio. Bye.
Okay.
Good. That's us then.
I'll have fulsome praise for the excellent team of officers that supported us, many of them whom we can't or haven't seen, but probably have heard. But I think I'll do that on the 7th. I think it'd be more appropriate if we do it on the 7th because there'll be more people there. And I hope those OSC members in the chamber on the 7th will support me.
Okay, can I just, on one of the earlier ones, I think it was the one that John Sloan chaired, if you look at the recommendations, they all start, we recommend, and then the next paragraph, we recommend. That's fine, but you might want to do a we recommend at the top and then like 4 bullet points or something. I don't know, but I'll leave that with you.
Yes, that's absolutely fine by us, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder then, I will get these tweaked and sent round to you all this evening. Not because I think you'll look at them this evening, but simply because tomorrow will be the last day for any amendments to it, simply to give us time to publish them on Thursday, which is the legal deadline ahead of overview and scrutiny on the 7th of Feb. So I'm really sorry that it's a very tight timescale, but I literally, if I haven't had comment back tomorrow, then it will not be included. I'll have to go with whatever I've got by close of business tomorrow. Hope that's understood.
Understood.
Can I ask you feed them into your chairman? We've got a fair few chairmen sitting there, but can you feed them your comments into your chairman as well, so that copy the chairman in, so that if there's a discussion with Tim, they're not in the dark. Goody. Excellent. Well, there we go. What a day it's been. Not the first time we've done virtual, but I think it's the first time we've done virtual with absolutely no space in the middle, no room for, and it's worked an absolute dream, but only because everybody engaged with the process. And not having a 5-minute speech from the executive member at the front was probably quite a positive move as well. So I think we'll note that for the future, because they could, if they want to get something to us, they can always bung out a few lines to us in the days before. They know who we are. So if they want to make a comment, that's fine. They will, of course, be able to, and I shall invite them offline to come to the 7th of Feb, and if they've got something sensible to say, I will certainly encourage you to receive it. Actually, constitutionally, they're absolutely entitled to come along and talk. But we'll handle that on the day. It's always good to see them.
It was a lousy lunch, though, David.
Well, yeah. Well, you weren't on the beans and salad cream again, were you? Did the courier not get round with yours?
No, strange.
I had pork and leek sausages with mash and a rather nice gravy, not too many lumps, and petit pois.